For 36 years, I was the invisible daughter, the one who didn't matter, the one whose achievements were met with silence, while my sister Emily collected all the praise. I thought I'd made peace with it. I was wrong. That Monday morning, I was in the middle of the biggest project of my career when my mother appeared at my door with my sister's 3 children. "You do nothing all day," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Watch them. Emily and Derek need a vacation." I tried to explain I had deadlines, responsibilities, a job that actually paid my bills. But to her, working from home meant I was useless. When I said no, she slapped by me, hard, right in front of the children. My cheek burned. Sophie started crying. And my sister Emily just stood there in her designer dress and said, "Mum, stop, we'll miss our flight." They left me with 3 traumatized kids and a red mark on my face. But they forgot one thing, the tiny red light blinking on my doorbell camera. Have you ever been treated like you're worthless by the people who should love you most? My name is Brooke Steele. I'm 36 years old and I work as a marketing specialist for a company that actually values what I do. I own my home outright, I pay my bills on time, and I've built a quiet, stable life entirely on my own. None of my family knows any of this because none of them ever thought to ask. That Monday morning started like any other. I sat at my desk in my small home office, coffee steaming beside my keyboard, reviewing the project that could finally earn me a promotion. The early sunlight filtered through my window, casting long shadows across the room. Everything felt ordinary, peaceful even. I had no idea that in less than an hour my entire life would crack open. As I worked, my mind drifted the way it sometimes does when I'm alone. I thought about my mother, my sister, Emily, and the strange arithmetic of love that never seemed to add up in my favour. I remember being 12 years old, standing in the kitchen with a letter in my hands. I had earned a full academic scholarship, one of only 3 given in the entire state that year. My heart was pounding as I showed it to my mother. She glanced at the paper, nodded once, and said, "That's nice, Brooke." Then she turned to Emily, who had just walked through the door, and her whole face transformed with joy. "Emily, you made the cheerleading squad. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you." She hugged Emily for what felt like forever. My scholarship letter sat on the counter, forgotten, until I quietly put it away in my room. That moment taught me something I've carried ever since. In my family, I was background noise. Emily was the song. The pattern repeated throughout our lives in ways both large and small. At birthday parties, Emily's cake was always bigger, her presents more thoughtful. At graduations, Emily's achievements were announced with pride, while mine were mentioned as afterthoughts, if at all. During holidays, I was expected to help cook and clean, but no one ever thanked me. Emily would arrive late, do nothing, and still receive all the praise for simply showing up. I learned to stop expecting anything different. I built my own life, made my own success, and accepted that my family would never see me the way they saw her. It hurt less that way, or at least I told myself it did. Sometimes I wondered if things could have been different. I thought about Aunt Ruth, my mother's younger sister, who used to come to family gatherings when I was a teenager. Ruth was kind to me in ways my mother never was. She noticed when I was quiet, asked about my interests, remembered my birthday. Then one year she simply vanished. No more visits, no more phone calls, no more Christmas cards. When I asked my mother what happened, she pressed her lips together and said, "Ruth is selfish and greedy. She only cared about money. We're better off without her." That was the end of the conversation. I wasn't allowed to ask again. But I never forgot Aunt Ruth, and I never stopped wondering what really happened to make her disappear so completely from our lives. That Monday morning, sitting at my desk with my coffee growing cold, I pushed those old memories aside. I had work to do. I had a future to build. I had learned long ago that dwelling on the past only kept me stuck there. Then, the doorbell rang. Not a polite single chime, but a rapid, insistent pounding. Someone was pressing the button over and over as if whatever waited on the other side couldn't wait another second. I pushed back from my desk, my heart already beating faster. Something in the urgency of that sound told me this wasn't a delivery driver or a neighbour stopping by to chat. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I walked to the front door, my mind still half on my work, still hoping this was something simple. A package I needed to sign for, a neighbour with a question. Anything ordinary. I opened the door and found my mother standing on my porch with two of my sister's children beside her. Lily, who was 10, held her younger brother, Mason's hand. Mason was 7, and he clutched a small backpack against his chest, like it was the only thing keeping him safe. Neither child looked at me. Their eyes were fixed on the ground, their shoulders slumped, their faces blank in a way that children's faces should never be. My mother didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was doing or apologise for showing up without warning. She simply announced, Emily and Derek are going to Cabo San Lucas. Their marriage is falling apart and they need this trip to save it. You're going to watch the children for a week. There was no question mark in her voice. No, please. No, would you mind? She stated it the way someone might state that the sky is blue or that water is wet. A fact, a certainty. Something that had already been decided without my input. I stood there for a moment trying to process what she had just said. A week. She wanted me to take 3 children for an entire week with no notice, no preparation, no discussion. And she expected me to simply agree because she had decided it should be so. Mum, I said carefully, I can't do this right now. I have a major project deadline coming up. This is the biggest assignment I've had all year. My promotion depends on it. My mother's expression didn't change. She looked at me the way she always had, as if my words were sounds without meaning, as if whatever I said was simply noise to be tolerated until she got what she wanted. Working from home isn't real work, Brooke. You sit at a computer all day. That's not the same as having actual responsibilities. She gestured toward the children. Emily sacrifices everything for her family. She has a husband, children, a household to manage. Meanwhile, you have no one to take care of. No husband. No children. Nothing. The least you can do is help your sister when she needs it. The words hit me like stones. No husband. No children. Nothing. As if my entire life, everything I had built, everything I had achieved amounted to nothing, because I hadn't followed the path my mother deemed acceptable. I wanted to tell her that I owned my home outright while Emily was drowning in debt. I wanted to tell her that my fake job paid more than she probably imagined. I wanted to tell her that I had spent years building something real and valuable even if she couldn't see it. But I had learned long ago that defending myself to my mother was like shouting into a hurricane. The words got swept away before they could land. Instead, I looked at the children. Lily still hadn't met my eyes. She stood perfectly straight, her hand wrapped around Mason's, her face composed in a way that broke my heart. No 10-year-old should look that controlled, that careful. As I watched, she bent down and picked up Mason's bag from where he had set it on the ground. She adjusted it on her own shoulder without being asked, adding its weight to whatever else she was already carrying. This child had been trained to take care of others. I recognised it because I had been the same way at her age. The responsible one, the helper, the one who learned early that her needs came last. Mason still hadn't spoken. He stared at his shoes, his small fingers twisting the straps of his backpack. I wondered what he was thinking. I wondered if anyone had bothered to explain to him what was happening, or if he had simply been loaded into the car and driven here like luggage. "Where's Sophie?" I asked, suddenly realising that Emily's youngest wasn't with them. "She's at preschool," my mother said dismissively. "I'll pick her up at 3 and bring her over. That gives you plenty of time to get settled with these two." Again, no question. No asking if that worked for me. She had already planned the entire day around the assumption that I would do whatever she told me to do. I felt something shift inside me. All those years of swallowing my feelings, of accepting whatever crumbs of acknowledgement my family threw my way, of telling myself it was easier not to fight. All of it pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. I thought about my project sitting open on my computer. I thought about the promotion I had worked toward for 3 years. I thought about all the times I had rearranged my life to accommodate my family's demands and all the times they had treated those sacrifices as if they meant nothing. And I made a decision. No, Mum. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I can't this time. I have real work to do, whether you believe it or not. Emily needs to find another solution. The change in my mother's face was instant. Her eyes went hard, her jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line that I remembered from childhood, from all those moments when I had dared to want something for myself instead of falling in line. That look used to terrify me. It meant punishment was coming. It meant I had crossed an invisible line and would pay for it in ways large and small. I wasn't a child anymore. I had my own home, my own life, my own money. She couldn't ground me or take away my privileges or make me feel small the way she used to. But standing there in my doorway, watching rage transform my mother's face, I felt 12 years old again. I felt like that girl holding her scholarship letter, waiting for approval that would never come. "What did you just say to me?" my mother asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Before I could answer, my mother pushed past me into the house. She didn't wait for an invitation. She simply walked through my front door as if she owned the place, pulling the children along behind her. Lily and Mason stumbled into my living room, still silent, still avoiding my eyes. I stood there stunned for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. "Mum, you can't just barge into my home," I said, following her inside. "I told you I can't do this right now." My mother ignored me completely. She was looking around my living room with that critical expression I knew so well, the one that found fault in everything I did. She set her purse on my couch, as if settling in for a long visit, then turned to the children and spoke to them for the first time since arriving. "Sit down and behave," she told them. "Your Aunt Brooke is going to take care of you while your parents are away." I opened my mouth to protest again, but movement outside my window caught my attention. A car door slammed, and then I saw her walking up my front path. Emily, my perfect older sister, dressed in white linen pants and a flowing blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless, her sunglasses pushed up on top of her head like she was already posing for vacation photos. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine advertisement for some tropical resort. Emily walked through my front door without knocking, without asking, without any acknowledgement that this was my home and not hers. She barely glanced at me before turning to our mother. "Is everything settled? We really need to get going. Derek is waiting in the car and our flight leaves in 3 hours." "I was just explaining things to Brooke," my mother said. Emily finally looked at me, and the expression on her face made my stomach tighten. It was the same look she had given me our entire lives. Dismissive, superior, as if I was a minor inconvenience standing between her and whatever she wanted. "Just watch them, Brooke," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's not like you have anything important going on. You sit at home all day anyway. This is the least you can do for family." Something inside me snapped. All those years of swallowing my pride, of accepting whatever treatment they decided to give me, of telling myself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. All of it crumbled in that moment. "No," I said. My voice was clear and firm. "I have a job. I have responsibilities. I have a life, Emily, even if you refuse to see it. You cannot dump your children on me without asking and expect me to just accept it. Find someone else." The room went very still. Lily and Mason sat frozen on my couch, their eyes wide. My mother's face had gone red, a vein pulsing visibly at her temple. Emily just stared at me as if I had started speaking a foreign language. Then my mother moved. She crossed the space between us in 2 quick steps, and before I could react, before I could even raise my hands to protect myself, her palm connected with my face. The slap was hard and sharp, the sound of it cracking through my living room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across my cheek, hot and immediate. I stumbled backward, my hand flying up to my face in shock. For a moment, nobody moved. The echo of that slap seemed to hang in the air, filling every corner of the room. Then Sophie, who I hadn't even noticed had arrived with Emily, started to cry. Her small, frightened sobs broke the silence, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her little backpack clutched against her chest, tears streaming down her face. She must have come in behind Emily. She had seen everything. Lily sat rigid on the couch, her face completely blank, as if she had learned long ago how to make herself disappear in moments like this. Mason stared at the floor, his hands gripping his knees so hard his knuckles had gone white. These children were not surprised. They were not shocked. They had seen adults behave this way before. That realization hit me almost as hard as the slap itself. I looked at Emily, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to defend me, to tell our mother that hitting someone was wrong, to show even a small amount of concern for her sister, who had just been assaulted in her own home. Emily checked her watch. "Mom, stop," she said, and for one brief second I thought she might actually stand up for me. Then she continued, "We need to get to the airport. We're going to miss our flight." That was it. That was all she had to say. Her sister had just been slapped across the face in front of 3 children, and Emily's only concern was making her flight to Cabo San Lucas. I meant nothing to her. My pain, my dignity, my basic right not to be hit in my own home. None of it mattered. My mother grabbed her purse from the couch and walked toward the door. Emily followed without a backward glance at me or her children. Sophie was still crying in the doorway, and Emily simply picked her up and carried her back outside. At the last moment, Emily set Sophie down on my porch and gave her a little push back toward the door. "Be good for Aunt Brooke," she said. Then she was gone. My mother paused at the door and looked back at me. My cheek was still burning, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. She pointed at me as if I was a misbehaving child. "I'll bring Sophie's things by later. Don't make this difficult, Brooke. You always have to make everything so difficult." Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. I stood in my living room with 3 shell-shocked children, my face throbbing, my heart pounding, watching through the window as my mother's car backed out of my driveway. Emily's rental car followed close behind. They drove away without looking back. Sophie had wandered inside and stood near her sibling, still sniffling. Lily had put an arm around her, automatically comforting her the way a mother should. Mason hadn't moved at all. I pressed my hand against my burning cheek and tried to breathe. Tried to think. Tried to understand what had just happened. Then I noticed something. A small red light blinking steadily near my front door. My doorbell camera. The one I had installed 2 years ago and barely thought about anymore. It was motion activated. It recorded everything that happened on my front porch and in the entryway. It had recorded everything. The rest of that day passed in a blur of practical tasks that kept my hands busy while my mind raced. I made lunch for the children. I set them up in the living room with cartoons and snacks. I answered their quiet questions about where things were in my house. I did everything a responsible adult would do when suddenly handed 3 young lives to care for all, while my cheek still throbbed and my thoughts kept circling back to that moment. The slap, the sound of it, the look on my mother's face as her hand connected with my skin. By evening, the children had eaten dinner and were curled up on my couch watching a movie. Sophie had finally stopped crying and had fallen asleep with her head in Lily's lap. Mason sat on the other end, his eyes fixed on the screen but clearly not watching. Lily stroked her little sister's hair with a gentleness that made my heart ache. These children had been through something today. They had witnessed something ugly, and yet they sat there quietly, asking for nothing, expecting nothing, already trained to make themselves small and easy. I stepped into my home office and closed the door part way, keeping it open enough that I could hear if someone needed me. Then I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were trembling slightly as I navigated to the doorbell camera app. Part of me didn't want to watch it. Part of me wanted to pretend the whole thing hadn't happened, to push it down into that dark place where I kept all the other painful memories of my family. But I couldn't do that anymore. Something had shifted inside me today, something fundamental. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I clicked play. The footage was clear. The camera had captured everything from the moment my mother arrived on my porch. I watched myself open the door, saw the confusion on my face as I took in the scene. I watched my mother push past me into the house. Watched the children shuffle inside with their heads down. The audio picked up our conversation with painful clarity. My reasonable explanations, her dismissive responses. Working from home isn't real work. You have no one to care for, nothing. Then Emily appeared in the frame, walking up the path, in her vacation clothes, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her enter my house without knocking. I heard her tell me to just watch the children because I had nothing important going on. I saw my own face as I said no, saw the determination there that I hadn't known I possessed. And then, the slap. Watching it from the outside was different than experiencing it. I could see how fast my mother moved, how little warning there was. I could see my head snap to the side, could see my hand fly up to my face. I could see Sophie in the doorway, already crying. I could see Lily's face go blank and Mason's eyes drop to the floor. I could see Emily check her watch. The footage continued as they left. My mother's final words about not making things difficult. Emily walking out without looking back. The door closing behind them. I sat staring at my laptop screen for a long time after the video ended. This was evidence. This was documentation of exactly what had happened, exactly how I had been treated, yet exactly how little I mattered to my own family. For the first time in my life, I had proof. I had power. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust. Karen Mitchell had been my friend for nearly 15 years. We had met at a community event when I first moved to this town, and she had taken me under her wing in a way that felt almost maternal. She was 58 now, retired from her career as a family lawyer, but her mind was still sharp and her advice was always solid. She answered on the third ring. "Brooke, is everything okay? You don't usually call this late." I told her everything. The arrival, the demands, the slap, all of it. Then I sent her the video file and waited while she watched it. The silence on her end of the line stretched on for what felt like forever. "Brooke," she finally said, her voice quiet and serious. "This is assault. What your mother did to you is a crime. It's documented on video, which means you have clear evidence if you ever wanted to press charges." I hadn't let myself think that far ahead yet. Pressing charges against my own mother. The idea felt enormous, terrifying, impossible. Karen continued, "And leaving those children with you without your consent, without any prior arrangement, that has legal implications too. You're not their legal guardian. You didn't agree to take responsibility for them. If something happened to one of those kids right now, there would be serious questions about who was actually supposed to be caring for them." "What should I do?" I asked. "For now, document everything. Keep that video backed up in multiple places. Write down exactly what happened while it's fresh in your mind. And, Brooke," she paused, "has your mother ever done anything like this before to you or anyone else?" The question hit me like a second slap. I thought about all the times my mother had grabbed my arm too hard, had shoved me out of her way, had raised her hand in warning. I thought about the constant verbal attacks, the years of being told I was less than, the systematic destruction of my self-worth. And then I thought about Aunt Ruth. Ruth, who disappeared from our lives 15 years ago. Ruth, who my mother called selfish and greedy. Ruth, who had been kind to me when no one else was. "I think so," I said slowly. "I think there might be a pattern." After I hung up with Karen, I opened a browser and typed 2 words into the search bar: Ruth Steele, Vermont. I didn't know why Vermont. I had a vague memory of hearing that's where she had gone, but I couldn't remember who had told me or when. The search results loaded, and there, near the top of the page, was a LinkedIn profile. Ruth Steele, family therapist. The photo showed a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and grey-streaked hair. She looked like the aunt I remembered, just older. just like me. I clicked on the profile, found a contact button, and before I could talk myself out of it, I started typing. Aunt Ruth, this is Brooke. Something happened with Mum today. I think I need to understand what happened with you 15 years ago. Can we talk? I pressed send. Then I walked back to the living room and looked at the children. Sophie was still asleep in Lily's lap. Mason had dozed off too, his head tilted against the armrest. Lily looked up at me with those two old eyes, and something passed between us. An understanding, a recognition. I looked down at my phone. Message sent. For the first time in 30 years, I was fighting back. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying everything that had happened, spinning through possibilities and plans, while the children slept peacefully in my guest room. By the time Tuesday morning arrived, I was exhausted but determined. I had a job to do both for my company and for myself. I couldn't let either one fall apart. The morning started with chaos. Lily and Mason woke up confused about where they were, and I spent the first hour answering questions and trying to establish some kind of routine. I made coffee, then realised I had nothing in my kitchen that children would actually want to eat for breakfast. I was searching through my pantry when Lily appeared beside me. I can make eggs, she said quietly. I make them for Mason and Sophie at home, when Mum is sleeping. My heart cracked a little at those words. A 10-year-old should not know how to cook breakfast for her siblings because her mother couldn't be bothered to wake up. But I just nodded and let her help me, watching as she moved around my kitchen with a competence that broke my heart. She knew how to crack eggs without getting shell in the bowl. She knew exactly how much butter to use in the pan. She knew to cut Mason's toast into triangles because that's how he liked it. This child had been taking care of others for far too long. After breakfast, I tried to work. My project deadline loomed over me, and I desperately needed to make progress. But every 5 minutes there was a question or a need or a small crisis that pulled me away from my computer. Mason couldn't find his favourite toy. Lily wanted to know if she could watch television. The Wi-Fi password needed to be shared so they could use their tablets. By mid-morning, I had accomplished almost nothing. I texted Emily around 11. What time did Mum say she'd bring Sophie? I stared at the screen waiting for those 3 dots that would indicate she was typing a response. Nothing. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. Still nothing. I called my mother's phone and got her voicemail. Her cheerful recorded message told me to leave my name and number, and she would call me back at her earliest convenience. I doubted that very much. I tried Emily's number next. The phone didn't even ring. A robotic voice informed me that the number I was trying to reach was not available. Of course. They were probably already on a beach somewhere, cocktails in hand, phones turned off, to avoid any interruptions to their precious vacation. Meanwhile, I was drowning in responsibilities they had dumped on me without a second thought. My neighbour, Margaret, came over at 1:30 to help with the children, while I had my video meeting. She was 67 years old, a widow with grandchildren of her own, and she had always been kind to me. I explained the situation briefly, leaving out the worst parts, and she agreed to keep Lily and Mason occupied for a few hours. I retreated to my home office, closed the door, and tried to focus on work. The meeting went reasonably well, all things considered. I presented my portion of the project, answered questions, and received positive feedback from my supervisor. For 1 hour, I almost felt normal, almost felt like the capable, professional woman I had worked so hard to become. Then the meeting ended, and reality came crashing back. It was 3:45 when my phone rang. I didn't recognise the number, but something made me answer anyway. A woman's voice came through the line, professional but concerned. Ms. Steele, this is Jennifer from Sunshine Preschool. I'm calling about Sophie Hartwell. My blood went cold. Sophie. I had been so caught up in managing Lily and Mason, so focused on my work, that I had almost forgotten about the youngest child. My mother had said she would pick Sophie up from preschool at 3 and bring her to my house. That was almost an hour ago. Sophie's grandmother was listed as the pickup today, the woman continued. She was supposed to arrive at 3 o'clock, but No one came. Sophie is very upset. We've been trying to reach her parents with no success. Your number was listed as an emergency contact from last year, so we're hoping you can help us figure out what's happening. I was already grabbing my keys before she finished speaking. I'm on my way. Please tell Sophie that her Aunt Brooke is coming to get her. I drove faster than I should have, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My mother had forgotten. She had actually forgotten to pick up her own granddaughter from school. A 5-year-old child had been sitting there for almost an hour, waiting for someone to come, watching other children leave with their families, wondering why no one wanted her. I pulled into the preschool parking lot and ran inside. The front office was bright and cheerful, decorated with children's artwork and colourful posters. But Sophie looked anything but cheerful. She sat in a small plastic chair against the wall, her backpack clutched against her chest like a shield, tears streaming down her face. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked so small, so lost, so completely alone. The moment she saw me, something shifted in her face. Recognition, relief, hope. She launched herself out of that chair and ran to me, throwing her tiny arms around my legs and holding on like I was the only solid thing in her world. I knelt down and pulled her into a proper hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs against my shoulder. The teacher standing nearby spoke softly. She kept saying, "Grandma promised. Grandma promised," over and over. Poor little thing. I held Sophie tighter, my own eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. This was wrong. All of this was so deeply, fundamentally wrong. A child should never have to feel this way. A child should never be forgotten. Sophie's crying gradually slowed. Her breath came in hiccups against my neck. Then she whispered something so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "Auntie Brooke, why does everyone forget me?" I didn't have an answer for her. I held Sophie for a long moment in that preschool office, feeling her small heart beat against mine, wishing I could find words that would make sense of something so senseless. But there were no words. There was only the truth, ugly and painful, that the people who should have loved this child most had failed her completely. I signed the necessary paperwork to take Sophie with me, grateful that my name had been listed as an emergency contact. The teacher gave me a sympathetic look as we left, and I wondered how often she saw situations like this. Children waiting, children forgotten, children learning far too young that they couldn't count on the adults in their lives. Sophie held my hand tightly as we walked to the car. I helped her into the back seat and buckled her seatbelt, making sure she was secure. She still clutched her little backpack, her eyes still red from crying. As I pulled out of the parking lot and started the drive home, the silence in the car felt heavy with things unsaid. Then, Sophie spoke, her voice small and matter-of-fact, in a way that broke my heart all over again. "Mummy forgets me sometimes too," she said. "She forgot to pick me up 3 times at school last year. Daddy had to come get me. He was mad at Mommy. They yelled a lot that night." I looked at her in the rearview mirror, this 5-year-old child who spoke about being forgotten, like it was just another part of her life. Not unusual, not worthy of outrage, just something that happened sometimes, like rain or traffic or any other minor inconvenience. "I'm sorry that happened to you, Sophie," I said carefully. "That must have felt really scary." She shrugged her small shoulders. "I cried the first time. But then I learnt to just wait. Someone always comes eventually." Someone always comes eventually. The words echoed in my mind as I drove. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. Sophie had learned to expect abandonment, to prepare for it, to simply endure it until someone remembered she existed. She was 5 years old, and she had already accepted that she wasn't a priority. I thought about calling Child Protective Services. I thought about refusing to help, about demanding that Emily and Derek come home immediately to deal with their own children. I thought about all the ways I could make this someone else's problem, could wash my hands of this whole mess and go back to my quiet, orderly life. But then I looked at Sophie again in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window, watching the houses pass by her face, calm and resigned. And I saw myself at that age, the little girl who waited by the window for a mother who was always too busy with Emily. The child who learned to stop expecting birthday parties or bedtime stories or any of the small acts of love that other children took for granted. The girl who grew up believing she didn't deserve attention because no one ever gave her any. I couldn't do that to these children. I couldn't be another adult who let them down. When we got home, I sent Margaret home with heartfelt thanks and gathered all 3 children in the living room. They looked at me with wary eyes, waiting to see what would happen next. I sat down on the coffee table facing them and took a deep breath. I know this isn't how any of us planned to spend this week, I said. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out together. Lily nodded slowly, her expression guarded, but hopeful. Mason just looked relieved. Sophie climbed onto the couch next to her sister and leaned against her, exhausted from the day's ordeal. After they were settled with a movie, I stepped into my office and called my boss. Linda answered on the second ring, her voice professional but warm. Brooke, how did the meeting go this afternoon? I explained the situation as briefly as I could. Family emergency, unexpected childcare responsibilities. I might need some flexibility over the next several days. Linda listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a pause. Brooke, is everything okay? This project is crucial for your promotion consideration. I want to support you, but I need to know you can still deliver. I can deliver, I said, and I meant it. I might have to work odd hours, but I will get this done. I just need a little grace. Linda agreed, though I could hear the concern in her voice. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at my computer screen. My cheeks still ached faintly from yesterday's slap. My mind still reeled from everything that had happened in the past 36 hours. My life had been completely upended by people who didn't think twice about using me. But something had changed. I wasn't the same woman who had opened her door yesterday morning ready to accept whatever treatment my family decided to dish out. I wasn't going to swallow this and move on like I always had before. This time would be different. I opened a new document on my computer and typed 2 words at the top: evidence file. Then I started writing. I documented everything, starting from the moment my mother appeared on my porch. The demands, the slap, Emily's indifference, the children being dumped without consent, Sophie being forgotten at school. I wrote down dates and times. I calculated the costs I was incurring, the work hours I was losing, the expenses of feeding and caring for 3 children who weren't my responsibility. I saved every text message, every voicemail, every scrap of evidence that showed exactly how my family had treated me. I would take care of these children. I would protect them and love them and show them that at least one adult in their lives could be counted on. But I would also protect myself. I would build a case piece by piece until I had everything I needed. When this week was over, there would be a reckoning. My mother and my sister had pushed me too far this time. They had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to push back. If they wanted war, they would get war. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, I sat on my couch in the darkness and let myself feel the exhaustion. Every muscle in my body ached. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. My mind felt stretched thin, pulled in too many directions at once. I had spent the day juggling work calls with snack requests, trying to meet deadlines while mediating arguments between siblings, attempting to maintain some semblance of professionalism while my personal life crumbled around me. I picked up my phone without really thinking about it and opened Facebook. I'm not sure what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted to see something normal, something outside the chaos of my current situation. Instead, I found Emily. Her profile was filled with new posts from the past 2 days. The first one showed her lounging by a sparkling blue pool, a colourful cocktail in her hand, her face tilted toward the sun with a blissful smile. The caption read, "Finally some peace. Needed this so badly." The second post was from what appeared to be an expensive restaurant, Emily and Derek sitting across from each other at a candlelit table, wine glasses raised in a toast. "Working on us," the caption said, followed by a heart. The most recent one showed Emily's feet in the sand ocean waves in the background. "Blessed and grateful for this time to reconnect. Relationship goals." I stared at those photos for a long time. Less than 24 hours ago, Sophie had been sobbing in a preschool office, abandoned by the grandmother who was supposed to pick her up. Yesterday morning, I had been slapped across the face for daring to suggest that my own needs mattered. And here was Emily posting about peace and blessings and relationship goals, completely oblivious to the destruction she had left behind. Or maybe not oblivious. Maybe she simply didn't care. The anger that rose in me was cold and sharp, different from the hurt I usually felt when it came to my family. This wasn't the dull ache of disappointment. This was something harder, something that felt almost like resolve. I tried calling my mother again. To my surprise, she actually answered. "Brooke." Her voice was flat, annoyed. "What is it now?" What is it now?" I repeated, incredulous. "Mum, you forgot to pick up Sophie from preschool yesterday. She was sitting there for almost an hour crying, waiting for someone to come get her. No one called me to say plans had changed. I had to rush across town to pick her up. She asked me why everyone forgets her." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When my mother spoke again, her tone hadn't changed at all. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? They're just children, Brooke. These things happen. When I was raising you and Emily, I did it alone after your father left, and I never complained. You always have to be so dramatic about everything." I waited for something more. An apology, an acknowledgement, even a hint of remorse. But there was nothing. She didn't mention forgetting Sophie. She didn't mention slapping me. It was as if those things had simply never happened, erased from her memory because they didn't matter to her. "I have to go," I said quietly and hung up before she could respond. That night I was jolted awake by screaming. For a confused moment I didn't know where I was or what was happening. Then I realised the sound was coming from the guest room where the children were sleeping. I threw off my covers and ran down the hall. Mason was sitting up in bed, his small body rigid, his face twisted with terror. He was screaming for his mother the same word over and over again, his eyes open but not really seeing anything. Lily was awake too, looking scared while Sophie slept through the commotion with the deep oblivion of early childhood. I sat down on the edge of Mason's bed and spoke softly, trying to bring him back from whatever nightmare had taken hold of him. "Mason, it's okay. You're safe. You're at Aunt Brooke's house. Everything is okay." It took a long time for him to calm down. I held him while his breathing slowed, rubbing his back in small circles, murmuring reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. Eventually, the tension drained from his body, and he slumped against me like a puppet with cut strings. "I had a bad dream," he whispered. "Do you want to tell me about it?" He was quiet for a moment, his small fingers twisting the fabric of my pajama shirt. Mommy and Daddy were yelling, really loud, and I couldn't make them stop. I tried to tell them to stop, but they couldn't hear me. My heart clenched. "Does that happen a lot at home, the yelling?" Mason nodded against my shoulder. "They yell all the time, late at night when they think we're sleeping. But I hear them. I always hear them." I held him tighter, wishing I could protect him from the things no child should have to carry. I stayed with him until he fell back asleep, his face finally peaceful, his small hand still clutching my shirt. Then I crept out of the room and closed the door softly behind me. It was nearly 3 a.m. I was too wired to sleep, so I went to my laptop and checked my email. There was a new message from Karen sent a few hours earlier. "Brooke." It read, "I reviewed the video you sent me and did some additional research. We need to talk seriously about your options. This is more significant than you might realize. Call me when you can. I've attached a document that outlines some relevant information. Please read it before we speak. I scrolled down to the attachment and clicked to open it. The document loaded on my screen, and I read the title at the top of the page, Legal Rights in Cases of Assault and Child Welfare Concerns. I read through the document Karen had sent me, taking in the legal terms and explanations that suddenly made my situation feel very different. What had seemed like a personal family conflict now had a framework, a structure, a set of rules that might actually work in my favour. By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling slightly, though I wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion or something else entirely. The next evening, after another long day of juggling work and children, I finally had a chance to call Karen properly. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. I didn't really want just needing something to hold on to. Karen answered quickly, her voice warm but serious. I've been waiting for your call. Did you read the document I sent? I did, I said, but I need you to walk me through it. I need to understand exactly where I stand. Karen took a breath, and when she spoke again, she sounded like the lawyer she had been for 30 years. Professional, clear, precise. Let's start with what happened on your porch. What your mother did to you is classified as misdemeanor battery in your state. It doesn't matter that she's your mother. It doesn't matter that it was just a slap. The law defines battery as any unwanted physical contact intended to harm or offend. You have video evidence that clearly shows her striking you. That makes this an extremely strong case. What would happen if I filed a police report? I asked. Your mother would likely be charged. With video evidence this clear, the prosecutor would almost certainly take the case. For a first offence, she'd probably face fines and mandatory anger management classes. If she has any prior incidents on record, or if she were to do something like this again, she could face jail time, even a short sentence. I sat with that for a moment. The idea of my mother being arrested, being charged with a crime, sitting in a courtroom facing a judge. It felt surreal, it felt impossible, and yet it also felt like something that should have happened a long time ago. What about Emily? I asked. What about leaving the children with me without my consent and forgetting Sophie at school? Karen's tone shifted slightly, becoming more measured. That's more complicated. What Emily did isn't technically illegal in most circumstances. Your family, and she could argue she had a reasonable expectation that you would care for the children. It's not enough for child abandonment charges, which require a more serious level of neglect or endangerment. So she just gets away with it? Not necessarily, Karen said. Here's what matters. You told me Sophie mentioned being forgotten at school 3 times last year, that Derek had to leave work to pick her up. If you combine that with this incident with Sophie being forgotten again by your mother while Emily was away, it establishes a pattern of irresponsibility. If Derek ever decides to file for divorce and there's a custody dispute, this kind of documented history would absolutely matter to a judge. I thought about Mason's nightmares, about the yelling he described, about the way all 3 children seemed to accept chaos as normal. Maybe Derek was already thinking about divorce. Maybe this trip was a last attempt to save something that was already broken. There's another angle, Karen continued. You've been keeping records, right? The expenses, the time you've spent caring for the children. Yes, I said. Everything. Food, supplies, the hours I've missed at work. Good. Because you can absolutely request compensation for the caregiving services you've provided. You didn't agree to this arrangement. You were given no choice. Professional childcare for 3 children in your area runs between $200 and $300 per day. You've been providing that service for free. You have every right to ask for reimbursement. The numbers started adding up in my head. 3 days so far, with at least 4 more to go. That was potentially over $2,000 by the time Emily and Derek returned. Money. I had every right to claim money that represented the value of my time and effort that my family had simply assumed they could take without asking. So what do I do now? I asked. Do I confront them? Tell them I'm going to press charges." "No," Karen said firmly. "That's the most important thing I can tell you. Do not threaten them openly. Do not give them any warning about what you're planning. Right now, they think they've gotten away with everything. They think you're going to take care of the children, absorb all the costs, and never say a word about any of it. Let them keep thinking that." "Why?" "Because people who think they're getting away with something keep doing it. They keep sending texts that incriminate them. They keep posting things on social media that show their priorities. They keep digging their own hole deeper and deeper. Your job right now is to document everything, save every message, screenshot every social media post, keep track of every expense and every hour. When the time comes to confront them, you'll have everything you need. They won't be able to deny anything or make excuses. The evidence will speak for itself." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. It made sense. It felt like something I could do, something I could control in a situation where so much felt out of my hands. "There's one more thing," Karen said, her voice softening slightly. "That message you sent to your Aunt Ruth. Have you heard back from her yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. I wasn't sure if I would. "If she responds, listen carefully to what she has to say. I've been thinking about what you told me about how she disappeared from your family 15 years ago, about how your mother always called her selfish and greedy. I have a feeling there's more to that story than you know, and I have a feeling her story might change everything." I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my kitchen for a long time, thinking about everything Karen had said. I had power, real, legal documented power. For the first time in my relationship with my family, I wasn't helpless. The realization settled into my bones like warmth on a cold day. By Thursday, something had shifted in the house. The children were still cautious around me, still uncertain about this strange new arrangement, but the sharp edges of their anxiety had begun to soften. They moved through my home more freely, now asked questions without flinching, even laughed a few times at cartoons on the television. It wasn't normal, not by any stretch. But it was better than it had been. That morning, I decided to make pancakes. It wasn't anything elaborate, just a simple recipe I'd learned years ago, but I thought the children might enjoy something warm and homemade. I mixed the batter while they sat at my kitchen table, still in their pajamas, watching me with curious eyes. When I set the first stack of pancakes on the table, Mason's face lit up with genuine surprise. "You made these actually made them." "I did," I said, sitting down across from him. "Do you like pancakes?" He nodded eagerly, already reaching for the syrup. "Mom never makes breakfast. We eat cereal from the box. The kind that comes in the bag, not even the good kind, with the prizes inside." Lily was quieter, cutting her pancakes into careful, precise pieces. Without looking up, she added, "Mom is usually still sleeping when we leave for school. She says mornings are hard for her." I absorbed that information without letting my reaction show on my face. Emily's still sleeping while her children got themselves ready for school. Emily, who couldn't be bothered to pour a bowl of cereal, let alone make something warm. Meanwhile, these kids had learned to fend for themselves. "Who makes sure you're ready for school?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Lily finally looked up at me. Her eyes were old in a way that no 10-year-old's eyes should be. "I do. I make Mason's lunch and Sophie's lunch. I make sure Mason has his homework in his backpack. I make sure Sophie has her blanket for nap time." She shrugged a small, resigned movement. "Someone has to help." Someone has to help. 4 words that contained an entire childhood of responsibility that should never have fallen on her shoulders. This little girl had been functioning as a third parent in her household, picking up the slack that her mother left behind, carrying burdens that belonged to adults. Mason, oblivious to the weight of the conversation, continued eating his pancakes with enthusiasm. Between bites, he said, "Daddy sleeps in the guest room now. He moved his stuff in there a while ago. They think we don't know they're fighting, but we hear everything. The walls aren't that thick. Lily shot him a sharp look, the kind of look that said he had revealed something he shouldn't have. But it was too late. The words were already out there hanging in the air between us. Derek in the guest room, fighting that the children could hear through the walls. The perfect family that Emily presented to the world was nothing but a carefully constructed lie, and even her own children knew it. I didn't press for more details. These kids had already shared more than they probably should have, more than they would have shared with most adults. I just nodded and let the conversation drift to lighter topics, to favourite foods and TV shows, and whether they wanted more pancakes. After breakfast, Sophie attached herself to my side like a small shadow. She followed me from room to room, holding my hand whenever possible, asking to be picked up when I sat down. She wanted to be close, constantly close, as if she was afraid that if she let go, I might disappear like everyone else in her life seemed to. In the afternoon, while Lily and Mason were occupied with a board game I'd found in my closet, Sophie tugged on my sleeve and looked up at me with those big, serious eyes. "Auntie Brooke," she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart. Will you forget me too?" The question hit me like a physical blow. This 5-year-old child had been forgotten so many times that she now expected it. She had learned to brace herself for abandonment, to assume that anyone who showed her kindness would eventually leave her behind. I knelt down so that I was at her eye level, taking her small hands in mine. "Sophie, listen to me. I will never forget you. Do you understand? Never. When you need me, I will be here, I promise." She studied my face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly, and then wrapped her arms around my neck in a tight hug. I held her close, this little girl who had been failed by so many people, and silently renewed my vow to make things right. That evening, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, I thought all 3 children were asleep. I was sitting in the living room, finally having a moment to myself, when I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway, wearing her pyjamas, her hair still damp from her bath. "I thought you were asleep," I said gently. "I couldn't sleep." She walked toward me slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. She was holding something, a piece of paper folded into a small square. "I wanted to give you this." She held out the paper, and I took it carefully. "What is it?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "I wrote it to Santa last Christmas. I never sent it. I knew it wouldn't make any difference, but I want you to read it. I think you'll understand." I waited until Lily had gone back upstairs before I unfolded the paper. Something told me I needed to be alone for this. The house was completely quiet now, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind against the windows. I smoothed the creased paper against my lap and began to read. The handwriting was careful and neat, the letters of a child who had been taught penmanship and practiced it diligently. But there were places where the pencil had pressed harder, where emotions had leaked through despite the tidy presentation. "Dear Santa," the letter began, "I don't need toys this year. I know you're probably surprised because kids always ask for toys. But I've been thinking about what I really want, and it's not something you can put in a box. I just want Mum to hug me every day. She used to hug me more when I was little, but now she's always tired or busy or sad. I want Mum to remember to pick me up from school. It's scary when everyone else goes home and I'm still waiting. I want Mum to stop crying. I hear her sometimes when she thinks we're asleep. I want Mum and Dad to stop yelling. When they yell, my stomach hurts and I can't sleep. That's all I want, Santa. I know it's a lot. I'll understand if you can't do it. Love, Lily. Age 9. I read the letter 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. This wasn't a Christmas list. This was a cry for help from a child who had learned that the things she needed most were the things she was least likely to receive. A 9-year-old girl had given up on toys and games and all the normal wishes of childhood because she understood even then that her family was broken in ways that no amount of presents could fix. I made it to my bedroom before I broke down. I closed the door behind me and sat on the edge of my bed, and then the tears came. not quiet tears, not the kind I could control. These were deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I had locked away a long time ago. I cried for Lily, for the weight she carried on her small shoulders. I cried for Mason and Sophie growing up in a house full of yelling and secrets and neglect. But most of all, I cried for the little girl I used to be, the one who had written almost identical words in her own childhood diary. I remembered that diary. It had a purple cover with a small lock that didn't really work. I had written in it almost every night from the time I was 8 until I was about 12, pouring out all the feelings I couldn't say out loud. The entries were full of confusion and pain questions that never got answered. Why doesn't Mom love me? What did I do wrong? Why is Emily always better? Why won't anyone see me? One entry in particular came back to me with such clarity that it felt like being transported through time. I was 10 years old, sitting on my bed in the room I had to share with Emily, because Emily needed her own space for her friends. I had written a letter that night too, but not to Santa. I had written to my father, who had died when I was 8, who had been the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I mattered. Dad, I had written, why did you leave me with her? She only sees Emily. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I'm never good enough. Emily gets everything and I get nothing. Am I invisible? Sometimes I feel like I don't even exist. I wish you were here. You would have noticed me. You always noticed me. I had buried that memory so deep I thought it was gone. But here it was rising to the surface with all its original pain intact. And now I was watching the same pattern play out in a new generation. Lily was me. Sophie was me. Children learning too young that they couldn't count on the people who were supposed to love them most. Children adapting to neglect because they had no other choice. Children making themselves small and quiet and helpful, hoping that maybe this time someone would finally see them. The cycle was repeating, just like it had always repeated. My grandmother had apparently done this to my mother and Ruth. My mother had done it to me while favouring Emily. And now, Emily was doing it to her own children, passing down the same wounds that had never healed, creating the same scars that would shape these kids for the rest of their lives. Something hardened inside me as I sat there in the darkness of my room. This wasn't just about getting compensated for my time anymore. This wasn't just about making Emily and my mother acknowledge what they had done to me. This was about breaking a cycle that had been spinning for generations, causing damage that rippled outward in ways none of us could fully see. I thought about Lily, that serious little girl with the old eyes carrying responsibilities no child should carry. I thought about how she had handed me that letter, trusting me with something precious and private. She had given it to me because she believed I would understand. And I did. I understood in a way that Emily never would, in a way that my mother never could. I was going to show these children something that no one had ever shown me. I was going to show them that adults could be held accountable, that wrong actions had consequences, that someone could stand up and say, this is not acceptable, and actually mean it. I was going to break the pattern, not just for myself, but for them, for Lily and Mason and Sophie, for every child who had ever written a letter asking only to be loved. I wiped my face and took a deep breath, feeling something settle inside me. Purpose, clarity, determination. I knew what I had to do now, and I was going to do it. My laptop sat on my nightstand where I had left it earlier. As I reached for a tissue, the screen lit up with a notification. An email had arrived. I almost ignored it, assuming it was work-related or spam, but something made me look closer. The subject line read, "RE, your message." The sender's name made my heart skip. Ruth Steele. I stayed up late that night reading Ruth's email. It was long and emotional, filled with hints of a story I had never known promises to tell me everything when we could speak properly. She said she had been waiting 15 years for someone in our family to reach out to her. She said there were things I needed to understand about our mother. about our family, about patterns that stretched back further than I could imagine. She wanted to schedule a video call for the weekend when we could talk without interruption. I replied, immediately agreeing to Saturday, then lay awake for hours with my mind spinning through possibilities. By Friday morning, I was running on almost no sleep, but I had to keep going. The children needed breakfast. My work needed attention. Life didn't pause just because everything was falling apart. I was in the kitchen making toast when my laptop chimed with an urgent email notification. I glanced at the screen and saw it was from my supervisor, Linda. The subject line read, "Please call me as soon as possible. Important." My stomach dropped. In my experience, urgent messages from supervisors rarely meant good news. Had the client complained about my delayed responses? Had my work quality slipped more than I realised during this chaotic week? I thought I had been managing everything well enough, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe this whole situation was about to cost me my job, on top of everything else. I got the children settled with their breakfast and retreated to my home office. My hands were slightly unsteady as I dialed Linda's number. She answered on the first ring. "Brooke, thank you for calling so quickly. I know you're dealing with a lot right now, and I want you to know how much I appreciate your dedication this week." That didn't sound like the opening to a termination conversation. I felt some of the tension in my shoulders release. "The reason I'm calling," Linda continued, "is that I have some news I wanted to share with you personally rather than through email. The Henderson project you've been working on, the client called me yesterday specifically to praise your work. They said your marketing strategy was exactly what they were looking for. Creative, thorough, professionally presented. They want to expand their contract with us, and they specifically requested that you continue leading their account." I sat down heavily in my desk chair, not sure I was hearing correctly. That's wonderful news." "There's more," Linda said. "Based on your performance on this project and your consistent excellence over the past 2 years, we'd like to offer you a promotion. Senior Marketing Manager. It comes with a 40% salary increase, more autonomy in client relationships, and a small team that would report to you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. A promotion, a 40% raise, recognition for years of hard work that my family had always dismissed as meaningless. While my mother was telling me that working from home wasn't real work, my company was telling me I was valuable enough to lead others. "Brooke, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm just processing. This is unexpected." Linda's voice warmed. "It shouldn't be unexpected. You've earned this, Brooke. What impresses me most is that your work quality hasn't suffered at all during this family crisis you mentioned. If anything, the Henderson deliverables were some of your best work. That kind of resilience and professionalism under pressure is exactly the leadership quality we need in senior management." I thought about the hours I had spent working late after the children were asleep, the early mornings before they woke up, the stolen moments during nap times, and quiet activities. I thought about how hard I had worked to prove that my family's assessment of me was wrong, even when no one in my family would ever see it. "There's something else I want to mention," Linda said. "I know you said you're dealing with a difficult family situation. I want to remind you that our company has an employee assistance program that includes access to legal support. If you're dealing with anything complicated, anything where you might need professional guidance, we can help connect you with resources. You don't have to handle everything alone." The offer caught me off guard. I had been so used to handling everything alone that the concept of having support felt almost foreign. Karen was helping me as a friend, but knowing my company also had resources available made me feel less isolated than I had in days. "Thank you, Linda. I might take you up on that." After we discussed the details of the promotion, including a start date that would begin after the new year, I asked Linda for one favour. "Could we keep this confidential for now? I'd prefer to announce it in my own time, after some personal matters are resolved." Linda agreed, without pressing for details. When I hung up the phone, I sat in silence for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. Senior Marketing Manager. a 40% raise. With this promotion, I would be earning more than Emily and Derek combined. Emily, who had always bragged about her husband's job in finance, who had always made comments about her important volunteer work on charity boards, who had always looked at my quiet career with barely concealed contempt. Emily, whose credit card debt had been secretly paid off by our mother, whose marriage was falling apart, whose children were being raised by their 10-year-old sister. The golden child, the successful one, the daughter who had everything. It turned out she had nothing but appearances, while I had built something real. The irony was almost too perfect. My family had spent 36 years telling me I was worthless, that I had nothing, that my life didn't matter, because I hadn't followed the path they deemed acceptable. And here was proof concrete and undeniable that I had value, that my work mattered, that I had created stability and success entirely on my own, without any help from the people who should have supported me. I added this information to the mental file I was building. Another card to play when the time was right. Another piece of evidence that their narrative about me had always been wrong. I was about to return to the kitchen to check on the children, when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. I looked at the screen and felt my pulse quicken. Video call request from Emily. After 4 days of silence, after ignoring my texts and letting her calls go to voicemail, after posting vacation photos while her daughter cried for her, my sister finally wanted to talk. I stared at the screen for a long moment, watching it buzz in my hand. Part of me wanted to ignore it to give her a taste of the silence she had given me. But another part of me was curious. What could she possibly want to say after everything that had happened? I took a deep breath and accepted the call. Emily's face filled my phone screen, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different from the stressed, rushing woman who had stood in my living room 5 days ago. Her skin was golden from the sun. Her hair was loose and styled in beachy waves. Behind her, I could see a balcony railing, and beyond that, the endless blue of the ocean meeting the sky. She held a tall glass filled with something pink and frozen, a paper umbrella sticking out of the top. She looked relaxed. She looked happy. She looked like someone who didn't have a care in the world. "Brooke," she said, as if we were just catching up casually, as if nothing unusual had happened between us. "I finally have a minute to check in. How are things going with the kids? Not, how are you? Not, thank you for taking care of my children. Not, I'm sorry this was so last minute. Just straight to business, as if I were the nanny giving a status report to the employer." "They're fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "We've found a routine." Good. Emily took a sip of her drink. "Listen, I need you to make sure Lily is keeping up with her homework. She has a spelling test on Monday and she tends to slack off when she's not being supervised. And don't let them eat too much sugar. Mason gets hyper and then he won't sleep, and Sophie is already difficult enough at bedtime without adding sugar to the mix." I listened to this stream of instructions with a growing sense of disbelief. She hadn't seen her children in almost a week. She hadn't called once to speak to them directly. And now when she finally deigned to make contact, she wasn't asking to talk to Lily or Mason or Sophie. She wasn't expressing concern about how they were adjusting to being away from home. She was issuing orders as if I were hired help who needed to be managed. "Emily," I said, cutting off her next instruction about bedtimes. "Sophie was forgotten at school on Tuesday." There was a brief pause. Emily's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together slightly. "What do you mean, forgotten?" "I mean, Mum was supposed to pick her up at 3 o'clock and she never showed. Sophie sat in the school office for almost an hour, crying, waiting for someone to come get her. I got a call from the preschool because no one could reach you or Derek or Mum. Sophie asked me why everyone forgets her." I watched Emily's face carefully as I spoke, looking for some sign of concern, some flicker of maternal instinct, some indication that this information bothered her at all. What I saw instead made my stomach turn. Emily rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, Sophie, She's so dramatic. She cries about everything, Brooke. Literally everything. If you give her the wrong colour cup, she cries. If her sandwich is cut into squares instead of triangles, she cries. Don't let her manipulate you with the tears. She's figured out that crying gets attention and she uses it constantly. I felt the anger rise in my chest, hot and sharp. A 5-year-old child had been abandoned at school, had sat alone wondering if anyone was coming for her, had asked her aunt why everyone in her life seemed to forget she existed. And her mother's response was to call her dramatic, to accuse her of manipulation, to dismiss her pain as a bid for attention. She was scared, Emily. She thought no one was coming. Well, someone did come. You came. So everything worked out fine. Emily waved her hand dismissively and took another sip of her drink. Honestly, Brooke, you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Kids forget things. Plans change. It happens. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my composure. Speaking of plans, Emily, this whole situation has cost me significant work time and money. Feeding 3 children for a week isn't cheap. I've had to rearrange my schedule, miss meetings, buy supplies. Are you planning to compensate me for any of this? The look on Emily's face was almost comical. Her mouth actually dropped open for a moment before she recovered and let out a sharp laugh. Compensate you. Brooke, you're their aunt. Family helps family. That's what we do. Family also asks, before dumping 3 children on someone's doorstep. Emily's expression hardened. Mom said you were being difficult about this. I didn't believe her, but I guess she was right. You know what your problem is, Brooke? You're selfish. You've always been selfish. You sit in that little house of yours with your little job, no kids, no husband, no responsibilities, and you can't even help out for 1 week without complaining. Meanwhile, I'm trying to save my marriage, trying to keep my family together, and all you can think about is money. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Emily, who had left her children without proper arrangements. Emily, who hadn't called to speak to them once. Emily, who was sitting on a resort balcony with a cocktail while her daughter cried herself to sleep at night. She was calling me selfish. Something shifted in me. The anger crystallized into something colder, something more controlled. I thought about the video on my phone, about Karen's advice, about all the evidence I had been carefully collecting. I thought about the promotion I had just received, the success I had built, the life I had created entirely on my own. I was done being the family punching bag. I was done accepting their version of reality. Emily, I said, my voice calm and steady. I have video of Mum slapping me. The change in Emily's face was immediate and dramatic. Her smile froze. The cocktail glass stopped halfway to her lips. The relaxed, superior expression vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. What? My doorbell camera recorded everything that happened on Monday morning. Mum forcing her way into my house, the confrontation, the slap, all of it, including the part where you stood there and did nothing except worry about missing your flight. Emily was silent for a long moment. The ocean breeze ruffled her hair, but she didn't seem to notice. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its condescension. What are you going to do with that? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, at this woman who had spent our entire lives treating me as less than as invisible as worthless. I thought about all the years of pain, all the dismissals and cruelties, all the ways she and my mother had made me feel like I didn't matter. And I felt something I had never felt before in my relationship with her power. I haven't decided yet, I said. Enjoy your vacation, Emily. I ended the call before she could respond. My phone started buzzing almost immediately after I hung up. Text after text from Emily coming so fast that the notifications stacked on top of each other. I sat on my couch and watched them arrive, reading each one without responding. The first message said, I can't believe you're threatening me. This is so typical of you. Then, you're completely overreacting. Mom just lost her temper. It happens. People get frustrated and do things they don't mean. You're acting like she committed a crime. She did commit a crime, I thought. Karen had made that very clear. But I said nothing. The next text. If you make a big deal out of this, you're going to destroy our family. Is that what you want? To tear everyone apart over one little incident? One little incident. As if being slapped in my own home in front of 3 children was something trivial, something that could be brushed aside and forgotten. As if 36 years of being treated as less than meant nothing. Emily kept going. You know what your problem is, Brooke? You always have to be the victim. Everything is always about you. Someone says something you don't like and suddenly you're traumatized. Mum was stressed. I was stressed. We were dealing with a crisis and you made everything harder by being difficult. And now you're holding some video over my head like you're going to use it against us. That's not what family does. I read that message 3 times. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its audacity. I was the one being difficult. I was the one making everything about myself. I was the one who should feel guilty for having evidence of what they had done to me. Not once in any of these messages did Emily apologize. Not once did she acknowledge that what happened was wrong. Instead, she was trying to make me feel crazy, trying to rewrite reality so that I was the problem instead of the victim. Another message arrived. I thought we were sisters. I thought family meant something to you. But I guess I was wrong. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're looking for any excuse to hurt me. Wow, congratulations. I hope it makes you feel good about yourself. I set the phone down and walked away from it. The children were in the guest room, occupied with a movie I had put on for them. I needed a moment to think, to process, to understand what I was really dealing with here. I went to my laptop and opened my email archives, searching through old messages I had saved over the years. I wasn't sure what I was looking for exactly, just a feeling that there was more to uncover, more pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to see. It took me almost an hour of searching, but I finally found it. An email chain from 5 years ago between my mother and a financial advisor, accidentally copied to me when Mum had meant to forward it to someone else. I had read it at the time and been confused, then pushed it out of my mind because it didn't seem to involve me. Now reading it again with new eyes, the meaning was clear. Mum had taken out a personal loan for $30,000. The email discussed payment plans and interest rates and how the funds would be used to consolidate and pay off credit card debt. But not her credit card debt. The email specifically mentioned that the debt belonged to her daughter Emily, who had accumulated it over several years of overspending and was now facing collection actions that could affect her credit score. $30,000. My mother had quietly borrowed $30,000 to bail Emily out of a financial hole she had dug for herself through irresponsible spending. I had never been told about this. Emily had certainly never mentioned it. The golden child had been rescued from her own mistakes, while I was left to struggle on my own, and no one had thought I deserved to know. The memories started flooding back then, a cascade of moments that suddenly made a different kind of sense. When Emily turned 16, Mum had bought her a car. Not a new car, but a decent used one that ran well and looked nice. When I turned 16 2 years later, I was given a bus pass and told that money was tight and I would have to make do. I remembered crying in my room that night, wondering what I had done to deserve less. When Emily got married at 25, the wedding was an elaborate affair. I was told it cost nearly $50,000, paid for almost entirely by our mother. There were hundreds of guests, a beautiful venue, a designer dress, flowers everywhere. It was the wedding of Emily's dreams, funded by a mother who apparently had endless resources when it came to her favourite daughter. When I started college, I asked if Mum could help with tuition. She said she couldn't afford it, that I would need to take out loans and work part-time to support myself. I spent my entire college experience drowning in financial stress while working 2 jobs to stay afloat. I had believed her when she said she couldn't help. I had believed the money simply wasn't there, but it was there. It was always there for Emily. For Emily's car, for Emily's wedding, for Emily's $30,000 in credit card debt that she had somehow managed to accumulate and couldn't pay off herself. The money was there whenever the golden child needed it. It just was never there for me. I sat back in my chair and let this new understanding settle over me. The favoritism hadn't just been emotional. It had been financial, too concrete and measurable. Tens of thousands of dollars poured into Emily over the years, while I was told to fend for myself, while I was made to feel like a burden for even asking for help. No wonder Emily felt so entitled. No wonder she treated me like the family servant. She had been taught her whole life that she was worth more than me, and our mother had backed up that lesson with cold, hard cash. My phone buzzed again with another text from Emily. I didn't even read it. Instead, I opened a new email to Karen and forwarded the entire text thread along with the old emails I had found about the loan. More evidence, more documentation, more proof of exactly how this family operated. I didn't respond to Emily. I didn't engage with her manipulation or defend myself against her accusations. Silence was my answer. Let her wonder what I was thinking. Let her worry about what I might do. For once, I had the power in this relationship, and I was going to use it wisely. Before going to bed, I remembered Ruth's email. In all the chaos of the day, I hadn't had time to read it properly, just a quick glance that told me she wanted to talk, wanted to share her story. Now, exhausted and emotionally drained, I opened it again. The email was long, filling my screen with paragraphs of text. But it was the first line that stopped me cold, that made me realize just how deep this rabbit hole was going to go. Brooke, I've been waiting 15 years for someone in that family to ask me what really happened. Saturday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight streaming through my windows. The children were in better spirits than they had been all week, playing together in the living room with toys I had dug out of storage from my own childhood. Watching them laugh and chase each other around the coffee table, you might almost think everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Nothing would ever be normal again after what I was about to learn. I made sure the children were settled with a movie and snacks, then retreated to my bedroom with my laptop. My hands were trembling slightly as I opened the video call application and clicked on Ruth's contact. The call rang twice before she answered, and suddenly I was looking at a face I hadn't seen in 15 years. Ruth had aged, of course. Her dark hair was now streaked with silver, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when I was a teenager. But her smile was the same warm and genuine, reaching all the way to her eyes in a way that my mother's smiles never did. She was sitting in what looked like a home office bookshelves, visible behind her sunlight falling across her shoulders. "Brooke," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on my name. "Look at you, you've grown into such a beautiful woman." I felt tears prick at my eyes unexpectedly. "Hi, Aunt Ruth. It's been a long time. Too long, far too long." She took a deep breath. "I read your message. I know something happened with your mother. Before we get into that, I need to tell you my story. The real story, not the version your mother told everyone after I left." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and Ruth began to speak. And as she did, the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed began falling into place. She told me that 20 years ago, Emily had wanted to buy her first house. She was engaged to Derek, just starting their lives together, and she had found the perfect place. But they didn't have enough for a down payment, and their credit wasn't strong enough to qualify for a good mortgage rate on their own. "Your mother came to me," Ruth said. "She asked if I could lend them $50,000. She said it would help Emily get started in life, that it was an investment in family. She swore up and down that she would pay me back within 5 years. I was doing well in my career by then. I had the money, and I wanted to help. So I said yes. $50,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was more than my entire college education had cost the education I had paid for myself through loans and part-time jobs because Mum said she couldn't afford to help. Ruth continued. 5 years passed, then 7, then 10. Every time I brought up the money, your mother had an excuse. Emily was having financial troubles. Derek's job wasn't paying well, they had children now, and expenses were high. There was always a reason why now wasn't the right time to start paying me back. I was patient. I was understanding. But after 15 years, I had had enough. Her voice grew quieter, and I could see the pain of old memories crossing her face. I went to a family dinner at your mother's house. I brought up the money calmly, respectfully. I said I understood it was difficult, but I needed to start seeing some repayment. I wasn't asking for the full amount right away, just a plan, just some acknowledgement that the debt existed and would eventually be honoured. "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Your mother slapped me. Right there at the dinner table in front of everyone. She called me a greedy, selfish woman who only cared about money. She said I was trying to destroy Emily's family over a loan that had been a gift, as if I had imagined the promises she made, the repayment schedule she had agreed to in writing. My mind flashed to Monday morning, to the crack of my mother's palm against my cheek, to the shock and the pain and the humiliation. History repeating itself. After that night, Ruth said, your mother told everyone I had abandoned the family over greed. She rewrote the entire story. In her version, I was the villain who tried to extort money from my own niece. She cut me off from every family gathering, every holiday, every milestone. I wasn't invited to Emily's baby showers or the children's birthdays. I wasn't told when your grandmother passed away. I was erased, Brooke. Completely erased. Why didn't you fight back? I asked. You had evidence. You had documentation. Ruth smiled sadly. I could have fought. I could have sued her for the money. I could have called everyone in the family and told my side of the story. But I was exhausted. I was hurt. And I had spent my whole life trying to earn your mother's approval, trying to prove that I was worthy of love. When she slapped me, something broke. I realized that I would never be enough for her, that nothing I did would ever change how she saw me. So I chose peace. I walked away to save myself. She leaned closer to the camera, her expression intense. But here's what you need to understand, Brooke. This pattern didn't start with me. It didn't even start with your mother. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? Your grandmother was the same way. She favoured your mother over me when we were growing up. I was the golden child. Your mother was the overlooked one, the invisible daughter who could never do anything right. She grew up feeling unloved, unworthy, desperate for approval that never came. The words hit me with the force of revelation. My mother, the overlooked daughter. My mother, invisible in her own family. It seemed impossible, but as Ruth spoke, I could almost see it. The patterns, the cycles, the wounds that never healed, just got passed down from one generation to the next. Your mother promised herself she would be different, Ruth continued. She swore she would never treat her own children the way our mother treated her. But trauma doesn't disappear, Brooke. It transfers, it mutates. Your mother didn't break the cycle, she just flipped it. She made Emily into the golden child she always wished she could be, and she made you into the invisible daughter she actually was. She recreated her own childhood, but this time she got to be the one in control. I sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb what I was hearing. My entire understanding of my family was shifting, rearranging itself into a new and terrible shape. Ruth's voice softened. I can't help you prosecute what your mother did to me. It was 20 years ago. The statute of limitations has long passed. But I can testify to her pattern of behaviour. I can show that what she did to you wasn't a one-time incident, wasn't a moment of lost temper. It's who she is. It's how she operates. And if you need me to stand beside you when you confront her, I will. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for telling me all of this. Ruth looked at me with eyes full of understanding, full of the shared pain of being invisible in the same family. Brooke, you're not alone, and you're not crazy. Everything you've felt your whole life, every sense of being overlooked and undervalued, it was real. But you need to be prepared for what's coming. When you confront them, when you finally demand accountability, your mother will try to make you the villain. She'll twist the story, rewrite history, convince everyone that you're the problem. That's how she survives. That's how she's always survived. After my call with Ruth ended, I sat alone in my bedroom for a long time, letting her words settle into my understanding of the world. 3 generations of pain. 3 generations of invisible daughters and golden children of favoritism and cruelty dressed up as family love. My mother had been wounded by her own mother, and instead of healing that wound, she had passed it on to me. The cycle was so clear now that I couldn't believe I had never seen it before. But I couldn't sit with these heavy thoughts forever. There were 3 children in my living room who needed attention and care, who deserved to have at least one adult in their lives who was fully present. I washed my face, took a few deep breaths, and went to join them. The afternoon was unusually warm for the season, and the children were restless from being cooped up inside. I decided to take them to the small park a few blocks from my house. Fresh air and exercise would be good for all of us. The walk there was filled with the simple chatter of children, questions about trees and clouds, and why the sky was blue. For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. Almost felt like we were just an aunt and her nieces and nephew enjoying a Saturday afternoon together. The park was mostly empty when we arrived. Sophie ran immediately for the swings, and I followed to push her, while Lily and Mason explored the climbing structure. The rhythm of pushing Sophie, watching her small body arc through the air, listening to her delighted squeals, was soothing in its simplicity. I let my mind drift, still processing everything Ruth had told me. After a while, Sophie tired of the swings and ran off to join her siblings. I sat down on a bench where I could watch all 3 of them, and Lily came to sit beside me. She had been quieter than usual today, more thoughtful. I wondered what was going on in that serious little mind of hers. "Aunt Brooke," she said after a few minutes of silence, "do you ever worry about money?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I answered honestly. "Everyone worries about money sometimes. Why do you ask?" Lily picked at a loose thread on her jacket, not meeting my eyes. "Daddy and Mummy fight about money a lot. Like a lot. Mummy buys things and hides them in the closet so Daddy won't see, but he always finds them. Last month, he found a whole bunch of shopping bags in the back of her closet, behind her dresses, where she thought he wouldn't look. They had a really big fight that night. Daddy said Mummy had a problem. Mummy said Daddy didn't understand how hard her life was." I absorbed this information carefully, trying not to show any reaction that might make Lily feel she had said something wrong. A shopping problem, hidden purchases, fights about money, combined with what I had discovered about the $30,000 debt my mother had paid off 5 years ago, a picture was forming of Emily's life that was very different from the perfect image she projected to the world. Mason had wandered over and caught the end of Lily's words. He plopped down on the bench on my other side, his cheeks flushed from running. "Daddy said this trip was the last chance," he announced. "I don't know what that means. Last chance for what?" But Daddy looked really angry when he said it. He was talking to Mommy in the kitchen, and he didn't know I was listening. The last chance. An ultimatum then. This vacation to Cabo San Lucas wasn't just a romantic getaway or an attempt to reconnect. It was Derek drawing a line in the sand. Fix this, or we're done. Save this marriage, or it's over. No wonder Emily had seemed so desperate to go, so willing to dump her children on anyone who would take them. Her entire life was on the line, and she knew it. Lily spoke again, her voice even quieter now. "Sometimes Mommy locks herself in the bathroom and cries. She thinks we don't hear her because she turns on the water, but the walls are thin. We hear everything." She looked up at me with those 2 old eyes. "Is Mommy okay? Aunt Brooke? Is something wrong with her?" The question broke something open in my chest. despite everything, despite the way Emily had treated me, despite her cruelty and dismissiveness, and complete lack of consideration for anyone but herself, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Compassion. This was my sister they were describing. My sister who locked herself in the bathroom to cry. My sister whose marriage was falling apart, whose finances were a disaster, whose children could hear her sobbing through the walls. Emily had been awful to me. That was undeniable. She had stood by while our mother slapped me. She had dismissed Sophie's abandonment at school. She had sent text after text calling me selfish and dramatic and accusing me of trying to destroy the family. She had taken and taken and taken from me my whole life without ever giving anything back. But she was also clearly drowning. Whatever dysfunction had created her, whatever favoritism had warped her sense of the world, it hadn't actually made her happy. It had made her someone who hid shopping bags in closets and cried in bathrooms and was about to lose her marriage. The golden child was tarnished, and maybe she always had been. Maybe the pedestal our mother put her on had never been a privilege at all, but a prison. Did this excuse her behaviour? No. Absolutely not. Understanding why someone acts badly doesn't make the bad actions acceptable. Emily was still responsible for her choices, still accountable for the harm she had caused. But sitting there on that park bench with her children, I realised that accountability and compassion could coexist. I could demand justice for myself while also recognising that my sister was a damaged person who had never learned how to be anything else. It didn't change what I was going to do. It didn't soften my resolve or make me doubt my plans, but it added a layer of complexity to my feelings, a recognition that this situation was about more than just good versus evil or victim versus villain. We were all products of the same broken family, all carrying wounds inflicted by the same hands. The difference was in how we chose to deal with those wounds. Emily had let hers turn her into someone who hurt others. I was determined to let mine turn me into someone who broke the cycle. We stayed at the park until the sun began to sink toward the horizon and the air grew cold. The walk home was quieter, all three children tired from their playing. I made dinner, supervised baths, read bedtime stories, the normal rhythms of caring for children, the same rhythms that Lily had been performing alone for far too long. After the children were asleep, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea trying to quiet my mind. The week had been overwhelming revelation after revelation, piling on top of each other until I could barely keep track of everything I had learned. Tomorrow, Emily and Derek would return. Tomorrow, I would have to face my sister and decide what came next. My phone buzzed with a text message. I picked it up, expecting another manipulation attempt from Emily. But the number was an unfamiliar one I didn't recognise. The message read, "This is Derek. I need to talk to you. Emily doesn't know I'm calling. Please." I stared at Derek's message for a long time before responding. Emily's husband reaching out to me in secret. Whatever he wanted to say, it was clearly something he didn't want Emily to know about. My curiosity won out over my caution, and I typed back a simple reply. "I can talk. When?" His response came immediately. "Tomorrow afternoon. Emily has a spa appointment at 2. I'll call you then." I barely slept that night, my mind churning with questions about what Derek could possibly want to tell me. By the time Sunday afternoon arrived, I had imagined a dozen different scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. The children were occupied with a craft project at the kitchen table, glue and glitter and construction paper spread everywhere. I excused myself to my bedroom and waited for the phone to ring. It rang exactly at 2:00. I answered on the first ring. "Brooke." Derek's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as if he was afraid of being overheard, even though he had said Emily would be at the spa. He sounded exhausted, drained in a way that went beyond simple tiredness. This was a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for a long time. "I'm here," I said. "What's going on, Derek?" There was a long pause before he spoke again. When he did, the words came out in a rush like he had been holding them in for months and couldn't contain them anymore. I need to tell you some things about Emily, about our marriage. Things I haven't told anyone because I didn't know who to trust. But after what happened this week, after hearing how she treated you, I think you deserve to know the truth. I sat down on the edge of my bed and waited. Emily has a problem, Derek said. A serious problem with money. I knew she liked to shop. I knew she sometimes bought things we didn't need, but I didn't know how bad it had gotten until 3 months ago when I found statements she had been hiding from me. He took a shaky breath. She's accumulated $45,000 in personal debt. Credit cards I didn't know existed, loans taken out in her name. Some of it was shopping, but a lot of it was these investment opportunities that turned out to be scams. People who promised they could double her money, make us rich. She believed them. She gave them everything. $45,000. The number was staggering. Combined with the $30,000 my mother had already paid off 5 years ago, Emily had burned through $75,000 that her family knew about, and those were just the debts that had been discovered. Who knew how much more was hidden? Why didn't she tell you? I asked. Shame, I think, fear. She grew up being told she was perfect, that she could do no wrong. Admitting she had made such massive mistakes would mean admitting she wasn't the golden child everyone always said she was. Derek's voice was bitter. Your mother didn't help. Every time Emily got into trouble, your mother bailed her out. Emily never had to face consequences, never had to learn that actions have repercussions. She just kept believing someone would always rescue her. I thought about my conversation with Ruth about the $50,000 that had never been repaid, about the pattern of financial exploitation that ran through our family like a poisoned river. Emily was both a product of that system and a perpetrator of it. She had learned from our mother that money could be taken without consequences, that family members existed to be used. Our marriage has been falling apart for a year, Derek continued, maybe longer. We haven't been happy in a long time. We argue constantly, mostly about money, but also about everything else. The kids hear us fighting. I know they do. I've tried to protect them, but how do you protect children from a marriage that's dying? Is that why you went on this trip? I asked. To try to save the marriage. This trip was my ultimatum, Derek admitted. I told Emily we needed to reconnect to remember why we fell in love, to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. I told her if things didn't change, if she didn't commit to getting help for her spending, if we couldn't find our way back to each other, then I was going to file for divorce. He laughed, but there was no humour in it. You want to know how it's going? She spent more time on her phone with financial advisors and debt counsellors than she has with me. She promised this trip would be about us, but she can't stop trying to fix the mess she made, which I understand I do, but it tells me where her priorities are, and they're not with me. Derek, I said carefully, did you know she left the kids with me? The silence that followed was answer enough. When he spoke again, his voice was tight with barely controlled anger. She told me your mother was handling it. She said Patricia would take the kids for the week, that everything was arranged. I never would have agreed to leaving them for this long without proper arrangements. I'm their father. I had a right to know who was caring for them. She didn't ask me, I said. She and my mother just showed up at my door and told me I was taking them. When I tried to refuse, my mother slapped me. I heard, Derek said quietly. Emily told me about the video you have. She's been panicking about it ever since you mentioned it. I think she's more worried about how it will make her look than about what actually happened to you. That sounded exactly like Emily. Image over substance. Appearance over reality. I'm sorry, Brooke, Derek said. I'm genuinely sorry for what you've been put through. I'm sorry for how Emily has treated you, how your mother has treated you. I'm sorry my children have been part of your burden this week, when they shouldn't have been your responsibility at all. I didn't know what to say. In all the years I had known Derek, we had never had a conversation like this. He had always been polite but distant, playing the role of dutiful husband at family gatherings, while I played the role of invisible sister. Now we were just two people who had been damaged by the same woman, finding unexpected common ground. "There's something I need to ask you," Derek said. "If things don't work out with Emily and me, if I end up filing for divorce, I need to know that someone will be there for the kids. Someone stable, someone who actually pays attention to them. They talk about you constantly, Brooke. Lily told me you're the first adult who actually listens to her. Sophie hasn't stopped asking when she can see Aunt Brooke again. Even Mason said you make the best pancakes he's ever had." I felt tears prick at my eyes unexpectedly. "I'll be there for them. No matter what happens with you and Emily, I'll be part of their lives, I promise." "Thank you." Derek's voice broke slightly. "I think I'm going to ask for a divorce, Brooke. I've been putting it off, hoping things would change, hoping this trip would fix something. But it hasn't. Nothing has changed. And when I get back and file those papers, everything is going to explode." After Derek hung up, I sat in the quiet of my bedroom and let his words sink in. Divorce. The explosion he described was coming, whether I did anything or not. Emily's carefully constructed world was already crumbling, and my confrontation would simply accelerate what was already inevitable. In a strange way, knowing that Derek was on my side, or at least not against me, gave me strength I hadn't expected to find. Monday morning arrived with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Emily and Derek were scheduled to return Tuesday afternoon. That gave me one day to prepare. One day to organise everything I had gathered over this impossible week. One day to transform from the invisible sister into someone who could no longer be ignored. I started with the evidence file I had been building since that first terrible day. I sat at my laptop and organised everything into folders, each one carefully labelled. The doorbell camera video went first, the footage of my mother's slap crystal clear and undeniable. I watched it one more time, not because I needed to see it again, but because I needed to remember why I was doing this. The sound of the impact, the shock on my own face, the fear in the children's eyes. This was real. This had happened, and I had proof. Next came the screenshots of Emily's text messages, every defensive accusation and manipulation tactic preserved in digital form. "You're overreacting. Why do you always have to be the victim? If you make this a big deal, you'll destroy the family." I organised them chronologically, creating a clear timeline of her attempts to gaslight me into silence. Then I've added my mother's dismissive messages, her refusal to apologise for forgetting Sophie, her insistence that I was making everything into a bigger deal than it needed to be. I created a spreadsheet of expenses. 7 days of childcare for 3 children at $300 per day, the going rate for professional care in my area, $2,100 in total. I added food costs, supplies I had purchased, the value of the work hours I had lost or rearranged. The numbers added up to a significant sum, concrete proof that my time and resources had value, even if my family had never treated them that way. Finally, I documented the Sophie incident with as much detail as I could remember. The phone call from the preschool, the drive to pick her up, her tear-stained face in the school office, her whispered question about why everyone forgot her. I included the revelation that this wasn't the first time she had been forgotten, that Emily had done this 3 times the previous year. A pattern of negligence documented and undeniable. In the afternoon, I called Karen. She had been expecting to hear from me, and she listened carefully as I walked her through everything I had compiled. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "This is thorough," she said. "Very thorough. You've done excellent work, Brooke. Now we need to decide what you want to do with it." "I want accountability," I said. "I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want compensation for my time and expenses. I want my mother to face the fact that she assaulted me and that there are consequences for that." Do you want to press charges, file a civil suit? I had thought about this question for days. Not unless I have to. I don't want to destroy my family. I just want them to see me, to finally understand that I'm a person with rights and boundaries that they can't just ignore. Karen's voice warmed with approval. That's a mature approach. Let's draft a letter of demands, something formal that lays out exactly what you're asking for and what the consequences will be if they refuse. It's not a lawsuit. It's a clear statement of your position and your expectations. We spent an hour on the phone crafting the letter together. Karen helped me find the right tone, firm but not cruel, assertive but not vindictive. The letter demanded repayment of my expenses and a formal acknowledgement of the harm that had been done to me. It noted that I had video evidence of assault and was prepared to involve law enforcement if necessary, but that I preferred to resolve things within the family if possible. It was professional and measured the kind of letter that couldn't be dismissed as emotional overreaction. Send me the final version, Karen said. I'll review it and make any last adjustments. And Brooke, remember the goal here is accountability, not destruction. You want them to understand what they did wrong and make it right. You don't want to burn everything down. After we hung up, I called Ruth. She answered immediately as if she had been waiting by the phone. Tomorrow is the day, I told her. Emily and Derek come back tomorrow afternoon. I'm planning to confront them. How are you feeling? Ruth asked. Scared, I admitted, but also ready. I've spent my whole life being afraid of my mother and my sister. I'm tired of being afraid. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she made an offer I hadn't expected. Would it help if I was there? Not physically, but I could join by video call. Sometimes people need to face everyone they've wronged at once. Your mother might find it harder to deny the pattern of her behaviour if I'm there to testify to what she did to me. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. My mother hadn't seen Ruth in 15 years. Having her suddenly appear ready to corroborate my claims with her own experiences would be a powerful statement. It would show that I wasn't alone, that I had allies, that the family's secrets were finally coming to light. Yes, I said. I'd like that. I'll call you tomorrow when it's time. That evening I sat down with the children. They were watching a movie. Sophie curled against Lily's side, Mason sprawled on the floor with a pillow. I turned off the television and gathered them around me on the couch. I need to talk to you about something, I said gently. Your parents are coming back tomorrow, and when they get here there's going to be a family meeting. The adults need to talk about some important things. Mason looked curious. Sophie looked worried. But it was Lily whose expression caught my attention, that too old understanding in her young eyes. Is it about what happened? She asked. When Grandma hit you, I shouldn't have been surprised that she remembered that she understood more than a 10-year-old should have to understand. Yes, it's about that and some other things too. Is Mummy in trouble? Lily asked quietly. I reached out and took her hand, looking into her serious face. We're going to try to make things better for everyone, I said. That's what this meeting is about, making things better. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. I love you, all three of you, and none of this is your fault. Lily squeezed my hand tightly before letting go. I could see she wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand what was happening in the adult world that she was far too young to be worrying about. But she didn't push. She just nodded and turned back to her siblings, gathering them up for their evening routine with the quiet competence that broke my heart every time I saw it. Bedtime that night felt different from all the other nights that week. There was a tenderness to it, an awareness that this strange time we had shared together was coming to an end. Whatever happened tomorrow, the children would go back to their parents, back to their real lives, and our little cocoon of pancake breakfasts and park visits and bedtime stories would dissolve into memory. Sophie was the last one I tucked in. She lay in the guest bed with her blanket pulled up to her chin, her big eyes watching me in the dim light of the nightlight I had bought for her on day 3. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead and bent to kiss her goodnight. Before I could straighten up, her small arms wrapped around my neck and pulled me into a fierce hug. She held on with surprising strength for such a little body, her face pressed against my shoulder. "I love you, Auntie Brooke," she whispered. "You're the best auntie in the whole world." I had to blink hard to keep the tears from falling. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much," Mason called out from his spot on the air mattress on the floor. "Aunt Brooke, will you come to my soccer game next month? I'm the goalie now. Coach says I'm getting really good." "I would love to come to your soccer game," I said, meaning every word. Lily, who was sharing the bed with Sophie, propped herself up on one elbow. "Can I call you sometimes, just to talk? Sometimes I need someone to talk to who isn't Mum or Dad." The request hit me harder than anything else she could have said. This child who had been parentified far too young, who carried burdens no 10-year-old should carry, was asking me to be someone she could lean on, not a replacement for her mother, just an addition. Someone who would listen, someone who would be there. "You can call me any time," I promised. "Day or night, I'll always answer." I left the door cracked open the way Sophie liked it and walked slowly back to the living room. The house was quiet now, the only sounds the settling of old walls and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I should have been tired. I was tired, bone deep, exhausted from a week of constant stress and emotional upheaval. But my mind wouldn't settle. I sat on the couch and stared at my phone at the folder, labelled evidence that evidence that contained everything I had gathered. The video, the texts, the financial records, the timeline of neglect, all of it organised and ready to be deployed tomorrow in the confrontation that would change everything. Doubt crept in like fog under a door. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to stand up in front of my mother and my sister and demand accountability for years of mistreatment? The woman I had been a week ago would never have considered it. The woman I had been a week ago would have swallowed her pain and moved on, convincing herself that keeping the peace was more important than her own dignity. I looked at my phone screen at the delete button that could make all of this go away. One tap, one decision. I could erase the evidence, could let tomorrow be just a simple handoff of children back to parents, could return to my quiet, invisible life and pretend none of this had ever happened. My mother and Emily would never know how close they had come to facing consequences. Everything could go back to normal. But what was normal? Normal was being slapped and expected to apologise. Normal was being called worthless by the people who should have valued me most. Normal was watching my sister live in luxury funded by our mother while I struggled alone. Normal was 36 years of being invisible, of being overlooked, of being told that my feelings and my needs and my very existence didn't matter. I opened the video. I had watched it so many times now that I knew every frame by heart, but I needed to see it again. I needed to remember why this mattered. The footage played on my small screen, my mother pushing past me into my house, the confrontation in the living room, Emily arriving in her vacation clothes, dismissing me with contempt, and then the slap, that crack of palm against cheek that had echoed through my living room and through my entire life. I watched my head snap to the side. I watched Sophie start to cry. I watched Emily check her watch. I thought about Lily's letter to Santa written by a 9-year-old girl who had given up on toys because all she wanted was for her mother to hug her to remember to pick her up to stop crying. I thought about Sophie asking why everyone forgot her. I thought about Mason having nightmares about his parents fighting. I thought about my own childhood, about the scholarship that wasn't celebrated, about the birthdays that were afterthoughts, about the constant message that I was less than, that I would never be enough, that Emily was the daughter worth loving, and I was just the spare. I closed my eyes and made my choice. I wasn't doing this just for myself, though. I was finally willing to admit that my own pain mattered enough to fight for. I was doing this for Lily and Mason and Sophie, who deserved to see that adults could be held accountable, that wrong actions had consequences, that someone in their family was willing to stand up and say, "This is not acceptable." I was doing this to break the cycle that had been spinning through our family for generations, from my grandmother to my mother to Emily, causing damage that rippled outward and hurt everyone it touched. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Karen. "Tomorrow, I'm ready." Her response came a minute later. "I know you are. You've got this, Brooke." Sleep came in fragments that night, broken by anxious dreams and long stretches of staring at the ceiling. But when the first light of dawn crept through my curtains, I was already awake. I got up and showered and dressed with care, choosing clothes that made me feel strong and capable. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. There was steel in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I was making coffee when I heard the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. It was earlier than expected. Emily and Derek weren't supposed to arrive until the afternoon. My heart began to pound as I walked to the window and looked outside. Two figures were getting out of a car I recognized as my mother's sedan. Patricia emerged from the driver's side. Emily climbed out of the passenger seat. Neither of them looked happy. Neither of them looked like they were here for a pleasant family reunion. They had come early. They had come together, and, from the expressions on their faces, they were ready for war. I set down my coffee cup and took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. They had come early, probably hoping to catch me off guard, to sweep in and reclaim the children before I could say anything uncomfortable. But I had been awake for hours. I had been ready for days. They were the ones who didn't know what was coming. I had already called Margaret earlier that morning and asked if she could take the children for a few hours. Some instinct had told me to get them out of the house before the confrontation. They had seen enough ugliness in their young lives. They didn't need to witness whatever was about to happen between the adults. Margaret had agreed, without hesitation, bless her, and the children were now safely at her house 2 doors down. I opened the front door before my mother could ring the bell. Emily walked in first, brushing past me without a greeting. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite conceal, but her posture still carried that familiar entitlement. "Where are the kids?" she demanded immediately. "I want to see them." "They're with my neighbour," I said. "They'll be back later. We need to talk first." My mother followed Emily inside, and I saw immediately that she had come ready for battle. Her jaw was set, her eyes hard, her whole body radiating the kind of righteous anger she had always used to intimidate me into submission. I recognized that look. I had been afraid of it my entire life. But something was different now. When she looked at me with those cold eyes waiting for me to flinch, waiting for me to back down the way I always had, I didn't look away. I held her gaze steadily, and after a long moment, it was she who blinked first. Derek came in last, closing the door behind him. He looked exhausted in a way that went beyond jet lag, the weariness of a man whose life was falling apart. He glanced at me briefly, and in that glance I saw acknowledgement, support, something that might have been gratitude. He knew what was coming. He had helped set it in motion. "Sit down," I said, and the authority in my own voice surprised me. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was calm, measured, completely assured. "We need to talk like adults." Emily's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't used to hearing that tone from me. None of them were. For 36 years, I had been the quiet one, the compliant one, the one who swallowed her feelings and did what she was told. This was someone new. My mother didn't sit. She stood in the middle of my living room with her arms crossed, glaring at me. "We don't have time for your drama, Brooke. We came to get the children and go home. Whatever issues you think you have, we can discuss them at another time." "We're going to discuss them now," I said. "Sit down, Mum." The use of that word Mum delivered in that flat, uncompromising tone seemed to shake something loose in her. She looked at Emily, who shrugged slightly, and then she slowly lowered herself onto my couch. Emily sat beside her. Derek took the armchair in the corner, positioning himself slightly apart from his wife, a distance that spoke volumes. I had already connected my laptop to the television before they arrived. The screen was dark, waiting. I picked up the remote and turned it on. Before we talk, I said, I want to show you something. I clicked play. The doorbell camera footage filled the screen larger and more detailed than it had appeared on my phone. There was my front porch, my door opening, my mother pushing her way inside with the children. The audio was clear enough to hear every word of the confrontation that followed. My reasonable protests, her dismissive responses, Emily arriving in her vacation clothes, her contemptuous comments about how I had nothing important to do, and then the slap. On the big screen, it was somehow even more shocking than I remembered. The speed of my mother's hand, the sound of the impact, my head snapping to the side, Sophie in the doorway starting to cry, Lily's face going blank, Marson staring at the floor, and Emily, beautiful Emily, in her designer outfit checking her watch and telling our mother to stop because they would miss their flight. The room was absolutely silent as the video played. I watched my mother's face as she watched herself assault her daughter. All the colour drained from her skin. Her lips pressed together into a thin, bloodless line. Her hands gripped the arm of the couch so tightly her knuckles turned white. Emily looked sick, actually physically ill, as if she might vomit right there on my living room carpet. Whatever she had told herself about that morning, whatever story she had constructed to make herself feel better about her inaction, it was crumbling in the face of undeniable video evidence. Derek watched the footage with grim satisfaction. He had heard about this moment, but now he was seeing it. Now he understood exactly what kind of family he had married into. The video ended. I let the silence stretch for a long moment before I spoke. "This is assault," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Documented on video with audio. I have consulted with a lawyer. Under state law, this is classified as misdemeanor battery, punishable by fines, mandatory anger management, and, in cases of repeat offence, jail time." I looked directly at my mother. "I am prepared to file a police report and press charges." Patricia's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in my memory, my mother was speechless. Emily found her voice first. "Brooke, let's not do anything hasty. I'm sure we can work this out as a family. There's no need to involve lawyers and police. Mum didn't mean to hurt you. She just lost her temper." "Just lost her temper," I repeated. "And when she loses her temper, she assaults people. That's not an excuse, Emily. That's a pattern." Before anyone could respond, my laptop chimed with an incoming notification. A video call request. I glanced at the screen and felt something loosen in my chest. Right on time. The notification read, "Ruth Steele would like to join." My mother's head snapped toward the laptop, her eyes widening. "Ruth? What does Ruth have to do with this?" I clicked accept, and Aunt Ruth's face filled the television screen, replacing the frozen final frame of the doorbell footage. She looked calm, composed, her silver-streaked hair pulled back from a face that was both familiar and strange after 15 years of absence. "Hello, Patricia," Ruth said, her voice carrying clearly through my speakers. "Hello, Emily. It's been a long time." My mother's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then something I had rarely seen from her raw, unfiltered panic. She stared at Ruth's image on the screen as if she were looking at a ghost risen from the grave to accuse her. "Ruth," my mother's voice came out as a whisper, "you have no right to be part of this. This is a family matter." Ruth's expression didn't waver. "I have every right to be here, Patricia. I was silenced for 15 years. I was cut off from my nieces, from family gatherings, from everything I cared about. Today, Brooke hears the truth. And so does Emily." Emily looked confused, her eyes darting between the screen and our mother. "Mum, what is she talking about Aunt Ruth left because she was greedy and selfish? That's what you always said." "That's what your mother told you," Ruth said calmly. "But it's not what happened. Would you like to know the real story, Emily? The story your mother has been hiding all these years? Emily glanced at Patricia, but our mother had gone very still, her face pale, her hands clenched in her lap. She didn't tell Ruth to stop. She didn't deny anything. She just sat there like a woman watching her carefully constructed world begin to collapse. Ruth took a deep breath and began to speak. 20 years ago, your mother came to me asking for help. Emily, you were engaged to Derek and wanted to buy your first house, but you didn't have enough for a down payment. Your mother asked if I could lend you the money. $50,000. I watched Emily's face as Ruth spoke. She clearly hadn't known about this loan, or if she hadn't known where the money came from. I said yes, Ruth continued. I loved my nieces. I wanted to help. Your mother swore to me that she would pay me back within 5 years. We even put it in writing. I had that money set aside for my own future. But I trusted family. I trusted Patricia. Ruth's voice remained steady, but I could hear the old pain underneath. 5 years passed, then 10. Every time I asked about repayment, there was an excuse. You and Derek were having financial troubles. There were children now. Times were hard. I was patient because that's what family does. But after 15 years, I had had enough. I brought it up at a family dinner calmly and respectfully and asked when I could expect to see my money returned. Emily's eyes widened. She was beginning to understand where this story was going. Your mother slapped me, Ruth said simply, in front of everyone at the dinner table. She called me a greedy, selfish woman who only cared about money. She accused me of trying to destroy your family by demanding repayment of what she suddenly claimed had been a gift, not a loan. And then she told everyone in the family that I had abandoned you all over greed. The room was completely silent. Emily stared at Ruth's image on the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. I was excommunicated, Ruth said, cut off from every family gathering, every holiday, every milestone. I wasn't told when our mother passed away. I wasn't invited to your wedding, Emily, or to meet your children when they were born. Your mother rewrote history, made me the villain, and everyone believed her because that was easier than questioning the family narrative. Emily turned slowly to face Patricia. Mum, is this true? Our mother didn't answer. She couldn't meet Emily's eyes. Her silence was confession enough. Is this true? Emily repeated, her voice rising. Did Aunt Ruth give you $50,000? Did you hit her? Patricia's voice came out small, defensive. It was complicated. Ruth doesn't understand how hard things were. I was trying to help you, Emily. Everything I did was for you. By stealing from your own sister, Emily's voice cracked. By hitting her. By lying about it for 15 years. I watched my sister struggle to reconcile what she was hearing with everything she had believed about our family. The golden child was discovering that her pedestal had been built on lies and violence and the silence of anyone who dared to question our mother's version of reality. Ruth spoke again, her voice gentle now. Emily, I don't tell you this to hurt you. I tell you because you need to understand. What your mother did to me 20 years ago is exactly what she did to Brooke last week. The slap, the accusations, the attempt to rewrite history and make the victim into the villain. This is a pattern. It's been going on for generations. Emily looked at her sharply. What do you mean, generations? Ruth's expression softened with something like compassion. Your grandmother did the same thing to your mother. Did you know that, Emily? Your mother wasn't the golden child in her family. She was the overlooked daughter, the invisible one, the child who could never do anything right. Our mother favoured me the way your mother favours you. Patricia grew up feeling unloved and unworthy, desperate for approval that never came. I stared at Ruth, then at my mother. The woman who had tormented me my whole life had once been just like me, invisible, unvalued, desperate. Your mother promised herself she would be different, Ruth continued. She swore she would never treat her own children the way our mother treated her. But trauma doesn't just disappear, it transfers, it mutates. Your mother didn't break the cycle, she flipped it. She made you, Emily, into the golden child she had always wished she could be. And she made Brooke into the invisible daughter she actually was. She recreated her own childhood, but this time she got to be the one in power. The silence that followed was heavy thick with revelations that were still sinking in. Emily sat down heavily on the couch, her leg seeming to give out beneath her. She stared at Patricia, but it was clear she wasn't seeing the mother she had always known. She was seeing a stranger, a woman who had lied to her, who had built Emily's entire sense of self on a foundation of favoritism and violence and the systematic destruction of anyone who challenged her. Your mother isn't evil, Ruth said quietly. She's wounded, deeply, profoundly wounded by her own childhood. But wounded people still cause harm, Emily. Understanding why someone hurts you doesn't mean you have to accept being hurt. And harm requires accountability, no matter what trauma caused it. Derek sat in the corner watching everything unfold with the expression of a man who had suspected something was wrong, but hadn't known how deep the rot went. He didn't look surprised exactly. He looked vindicated. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. She turned to face Patricia, her eyes searching her mother's face for something, anything that would make this make sense. What else have you lied to me about? Patricia still couldn't answer Emily's question. She sat on my couch looking smaller than I had ever seen her, diminished by the weight of secrets that had finally been dragged into the light. For a woman who had always seemed so powerful, so certain of her own righteousness, she now looked almost fragile. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Emily was staring at our mother with an expression I had never seen on her face before. The entitled confidence was gone. The superiority was gone. In their place was something raw and wounded, a child discovering that the parent she had trusted had been lying to her for her entire life. All these years, Emily said, her voice trembling, all these years you told me Aunt Ruth was selfish. You told me she abandoned us over money. You made me believe she didn't love us. And the whole time you were the one who... She couldn't finish the sentence. Her voice broke, and then she was crying. But these weren't the tears I had seen from Emily before. I had watched my sister cry many times over the years, usually when she wanted something, or when she was trying to manipulate a situation to her advantage. Those tears had always seemed performative, carefully calibrated for maximum effect. These were different. These were ugly, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, a place she had kept hidden for a very long time. Derek half rose from his chair, an instinctive movement toward his wife, but then he stopped himself. He sat back down, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Whatever was happening between them, whatever had happened in Cabo San Lucas, it was clear that the automatic impulse to comfort her was warring with something else. Exhaustion, maybe, or betrayal, or the simple fact that he had been hurt too many times to keep offering comfort that was never reciprocated. Emily's sobs filled my living room, raw and painful to hear. Ruth watched from the screen with an expression of sad understanding. Patricia sat frozen, unable to move or speak, and I stood in the middle of it all, watching my sister fall apart and feeling something I hadn't expected to feel: pity. I can't do this anymore, Emily gasped between sobs. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when everything is falling apart. She looked up at me, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks, her perfect facade completely destroyed. You want to know the truth, Brooke? The real truth about my perfect life? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I'm $45,000 in debt, Emily said. Credit cards, loans, money I borrowed and can't pay back. I've been hiding it from Derek for years, but he found out 3 months ago and now our marriage is over. This trip was supposed to save us, but it didn't save anything. He barely looked at me the whole time we were there. Derek closed his eyes, confirming every word. And the debt isn't even the worst part. Emily continued, her voice cracking. I've been depressed for years, real depression, the kind where you can barely get out of bed in the morning. I take anxiety medication that I hide from everyone because I'm so ashamed. I see a therapist twice a week and I lie about where I'm going. I've been drowning for years while pretending I'm fine because that's what everyone expects from me. Perfect Emily, golden child Emily, the daughter who has everything together. She laughed bitterly through her tears. You want to know a secret? I've been jealous of you my whole life. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. Jealous of me? Yes, jealous of you. Emily wiped her face with her hands, smearing her makeup even more. You're free. You're independent. You built your own life without anyone's help. You don't need anyone to tell you you're good enough because you already know it. You walk through the world like someone who doesn't care what other people think. She shook her head. I've never had that. I've spent my entire life trying to live up to what Mom expected of me, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and I failed at all of it. I'm not perfect at anything. I'm just exhausted and scared and drowning. The room fell silent except for Emily's ragged breathing. Ruth's face on the screen was thoughtful, absorbing everything. Derek stared at his wife as if seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Patricia remained motionless, her face unreadable, and I stood there, trying to reconcile this broken woman with the sister who had tormented me for decades. The sister who had stood by while our mother slapped me. The sister who had called Sophie dramatic for crying when she was forgotten at school. The sister who had sent text after text, calling me selfish and accusing me of trying to destroy the family. I thought about Sophie's tear-stained face in that preschool office. I thought about Lily's letter to Santa, asking only to be hugged by her mother. I thought about Mason's nightmares, his small voice describing parents who yelled through thin walls. I thought about 3 children who had learned to fend for themselves because their mother was too depressed and overwhelmed to take care of them. I believed Emily was struggling. I could see it, now could see the cracks in the facade that had always been there if I had looked closely enough. Her pain was real. Her drowning was real. And part of me, the part that still remembered what it felt like to be a child desperate for love in a house where love was conditional, felt genuine compassion for what she was going through. But compassion and accountability were not mutually exclusive. Understanding why someone hurt you didn't mean you had to accept being hurt. Ruth had said that, and she was right. Emily, I said slowly, I hear you. I believe you're struggling. I can see that you've been carrying things I didn't know about. Emily looked up at me, a flicker of hope in her red-rimmed eyes. Maybe she thought this was the moment I would fold, the moment I would tell her everything was forgiven, and we could go back to the way things were. Maybe she thought my compassion would translate into capitulation. But I continued, and I saw that hope flicker and dim. Your struggle doesn't give you permission to hurt others. Emily flinched as if I had struck her. Your children, suffering, I said, keeping my voice steady. Lily is 10 years old, and she functions as a third parent in your house. She makes her siblings lunches. She gets them ready for school while you sleep. She wrote a letter to Santa asking only to be hugged by her mother because she couldn't think of anything else she wanted more. I saw Emily's face crumple further with each word. Sophie has been forgotten at school so many times that she's learned to just wait because someone always comes eventually. Mason has nightmares about you and Derek fighting. He hears everything through the walls. Emily was sobbing again, but I couldn't stop. She needed to hear this. Someone needed to say it out loud. I was ignored and dismissed and made to feel invisible my entire childhood. I said, I know what that does to a person. I know the wounds it leaves. And I watched you this week through your social media posts and your phone calls and your complete absence from your children's lives, and I realised that you're doing to them exactly what was done to me. The cycle is continuing. Your children are becoming invisible while you drown. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ruth said nothing from the screen. I looked at my sister, at this woman who had been my tormentor, and who was also, I could finally see, a victim in her own right. Both things could be true. Both things were true. I hear you, Emily, I said quietly. I believe you're struggling, but your struggle doesn't give you permission to hurt others. So, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. What are you going to do differently? Emily couldn't answer my question. She sat on the couch with her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The perfect sister, the golden child, had been stripped down to something raw and human, and she didn't know how to exist in that vulnerable state. She had spent her whole life being told she was special, being protected from consequences, being elevated above everyone else. Now, she was just a woman who had failed at her marriage, failed at her finances, and failed at being a mother. And she had no idea what to do about any of it. The attention in the room slowly shifted to Patricia. My mother had been sitting in silence throughout Emily's breakdown, watching her favoured daughter fall apart without moving to comfort her. I wondered what was going through her mind. Was she calculating how to spin this situation to her advantage? Was she preparing her defence? Or was she, for the first time in her life, actually confronting the consequences of her choices? Ruth's voice came through the speakers, gentle but firm. Patricia, Emily and Brooke deserve to know the truth. All of it. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost compassionate. Tell them about our childhood. Tell them about Mother. Patricia's head snapped up. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, Ruth said. You know it does. You've spent 60 years running from it, but it caught up with you anyway. It always does. The room fell silent. Emily had stopped crying and was watching our mother with exhausted, bloodshot eyes. Derek leaned forward in his chair, sensing that something important was about to happen. I stood very still, barely breathing, waiting. For a long moment, I thought Patricia was going to refuse. Her jaw tightened, her hands clenched in her lap. She had spent a lifetime keeping her secrets locked away, presenting a facade of strength and certainty to the world. Opening that door now in front of her daughters and her estranged sister would require her to admit things she had never admitted to anyone. But something had shifted. Maybe it was seeing Emily so broken. Maybe it was Ruth's presence, a ghost from her past who knew the truth, whether Patricia admitted it or not. Maybe it was simply that she was tired, finally tired of carrying the weight of all those years. When she spoke, her voice was different than I had ever heard it. Small, uncertain. The voice of a child, not a woman who had dominated her family for decades. Our mother was a difficult woman, Patricia began slowly. You never knew her well, Brooke. She died when you were young, but she had very specific ideas about what her daughters should be, what they should look like, how they should behave. And Ruth? Patricia glanced at the screen at her sister's patient face. Ruth was everything Mother wanted. Pretty, talented, charming. Everyone loved Ruth. Everyone. Ruth said nothing. Her expression remained neutral, listening. I was the difficult one, Patricia continued, and now her voice was trembling. I was too loud, too opinionated, too plain. Nothing I did was ever good enough. If I got good grades, Mother would point out that Ruth's grades were better. If I helped with housework, Mother would find something I'd done wrong. I spent my entire childhood trying to earn her approval, and I never got it. Not once. I felt something shift in my chest. I knew this story. I had lived this story. I was looking at the woman who had tormented me my whole life, and seeing for the first time the wounded child she had once been. She hit me, Patricia said quietly. When I talked back, when I was too loud, when I embarrassed her in front of her friends. She called it discipline, but it was... She stopped, swallowed hard. It was anger. She was angry at me for not being Ruth, for not being the daughter she wanted. Emily made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She was hearing this for the first time, I realised. Patricia had never told her any of this. When I grew up and had my own children, Patricia continued, I swore I would be different. I swore I would love both of you equally. I would never play favourites the way Mother had. I would never make one child feel less than the other. She finally looked at me and there were tears in her eyes. Actual tears. I had never seen my mother cry before. But then you were born, Brooke, and when I looked at you... She stopped. Her face crumpled. When she spoke again, her voice broke on every word. When I looked at you, I saw myself, the same stubbornness, the same independence, the same refusal to just go along with what everyone wanted. And I was terrified. I was terrified that you would end up like me, desperate for approval, crushed by rejection. I thought if I made you strong, if I made you independent, if I taught you not to need anyone, then you would be protected. You wouldn't be hurt the way I was hurt. The tears were falling freely down her face now. So I pushed you away. I withheld affection because I thought it would make you stronger. I praised Emily because I saw so much of Ruth in her, so much of everything our mother had loved, and I thought if I gave Emily what I never had, somehow that would make up for everything. Somehow that would break the cycle. She laughed bitterly through her tears. But I didn't break the cycle. I just flipped it. I became my mother, doing to you exactly what she did to me, making you invisible, making you feel worthless, hitting you when you stood up for yourself. She covered her face with her hands. I didn't realise it until Ruth said it out loud. I became exactly what I swore I would never be. The room sat in heavy silence. I looked at my mother, this woman I had feared and resented my entire life, and I saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a monster, not as a villain, as a wounded child who had grown into a wounded woman, who had passed her wounds on to her own children without ever understanding what she was doing. I thought about Ruth, who had escaped the family, rather than perpetuate the cycle. I thought about Patricia, who had tried to escape and failed becoming her mother, despite her best intentions. I thought about Emily, already passing the same wounds to her own children. And I thought about Lily, 10 years old, writing letters to Santa about wanting to be hugged, carrying burdens no child should carry. 3 generations of wounded women. Maybe 4 if you counted our grandmother. Maybe more, stretching back through time in an unbroken chain of pain. And somewhere in that chain, someone had to be the one who stopped it. Someone had to be the one who said enough. I looked at my mother, at her tear-streaked face, and her shaking hands and the devastation in her eyes. And I felt something I had never expected to feel, for her compassion. Not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. But compassion for the child she had been, the child who had never been good enough, who had spent her whole life trying to outrun a wound that only festered in the dark. I understand now, Mum, I said quietly. I really do. I understand where this came from. I understand why you became what you became. Patricia looked up at me, with something like hope in her eyes. But understanding doesn't mean I accept what you did. I continued, and I watched that hope flicker. You hurt me. You hurt Ruth. You hurt Emily by making her into something she was never meant to be. And now, Emily's children are being hurt because the cycle kept spinning. Understanding why you did it doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't heal the wounds. I took a deep breath. You have to make things right, Mum. Not with words, not with excuses, with actions. You have to actually change, or understanding won't mean anything at all. The room was heavy with everything that had been said, all the secrets that had finally been dragged into the light. Emily sat slumped on the couch, her face swollen from crying. Patricia looked smaller than I had ever seen her, diminished by the confession she had just made. Derek remained in his corner chair watching everything, with the expression of a man who was seeing his wife's family clearly for the first time. And Ruth's face still filled the screen, patient and steady, bearing witness to a reckoning that had been 15 years in the making. I had spent my whole life being silent, being compliant, being the daughter who never made waves. That ended today. I had listened to their pain, had opened myself to understanding. Their wounds had allowed myself to feel compassion for the damaged people they were. Now it was time to be clear about what I needed. I picked up a folder I had placed on the side table earlier that morning. Inside were the documents Karen and I had prepared. I didn't need to read them. I had memorized every word. But having them in my hands made this feel official, serious, real. "Emily," I said, and my sister looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I have some requirements, terms for moving forward." She nodded weakly, too exhausted to protest. "First, you will pay me $2,100 for childcare costs. That's $300 per day for 7 days, which is the standard rate for professional care of 3 children in this area. You treated me like hired help, so you can pay me like hired help." Emily flinched but didn't argue. Derek's expression didn't change. He had probably expected this. "Second, you will apologize to your children. Not to me. To them. They watched their grandmother hit me. They spent a week away from their parents with no explanation. Sophie was forgotten at school and spent an hour crying waiting for someone to come. Lily has been raising her siblings because you couldn't get out of bed in the morning. They deserve to hear an adult take responsibility for the chaos in their lives." Emily's face crumpled again, but she nodded. "Third, you will sign a written commitment to never leave your children with anyone without that person's explicit consent. No more dumping them on doorsteps. No more assuming someone will take them because it's convenient for you. If you need childcare, you ask. You arrange, you confirm, you treat the people in your life like human beings whose time has value." "I understand," Emily whispered. "Fourth, you will begin individual therapy within 30 days. Real therapy with a licensed professional to address the depression and anxiety you've been hiding. And you and Derek will begin marriage counselling, assuming Derek is willing." I glanced at him. "That's between the two of you. But you need help, Emily. More help than I can give you." Derek spoke for the first time in what felt like hours. "I'm willing, if she's actually committed to change." Emily looked at her husband and something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but maybe the first fragile thread of hope. They had a long road ahead of them and I didn't know if they would make it. But at least they were both willing to try. I turned to my mother. Patricia straightened slightly in her seat, bracing herself for what was coming. She had always been the stronger one, the one who controlled everything. Now, she was waiting for her daughter to deliver judgment. The reversal was not lost on either of us. "Mom," I said, "my terms for you are different." She nodded once, her face pale but composed. "First, I want a genuine apology, not an excuse, not an explanation. A real apology delivered right now in front of everyone in this room and Ruth on the screen. An acknowledgement of what you did to me last Monday and what you've done to me my entire life." As Patricia swallowed hard but didn't look away. "Second, I want you to acknowledge what you did to Ruth. The money you never repaid, the slap at the family dinner, the 15 years of lies you told about her. She deserves to hear you admit what you did." On the screen, Ruth's expression remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or vindication, or simply the relief of finally being believed. "Third, you will begin therapy to address your childhood trauma, not because I think it excuses what you did, but because it's the only way the cycle stops. You can't heal what you won't face. And you have grandchildren now, Mum. Lily and Mason and Sophie. They deserve a grandmother who has done the work to break the pattern, not one who will pass it on to the next generation. Patricia's eyes glistened with tears she was fighting to hold back. Fourth, you will respect my boundaries going forward. When I say no, you will accept it. When I set limits, you will honour them. I am not your property. I am not your servant. I am your daughter, and I deserve to be treated like one. The room was silent. I let the weight of my words settle before I continued. Let me be clear about what I'm not asking for, I said. I am not filing assault charges. Not unless this behaviour ever happens again. If you raise your hand to me or anyone else in this family, I will go to the police and I will press charges, and there will be nothing you can say to stop me. But today, I am choosing not to pursue that path. Patricia let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. I am not asking for money beyond what I spent caring for Emily's children. I am not trying to bankrupt anyone or destroy anyone's life. I don't want revenge. I want justice. I want accountability. I want to be treated like a human being whose feelings matter and whose boundaries are respected. I looked at each of them in turn. Emily broken and exhausted. Patricia diminished but listening. Derek supportive and watchful, Ruth bearing witness from hundreds of miles away. These terms are not negotiable, I said. If you refuse any of them, I will file the police report today. I will provide all of my evidence to Derek's divorce attorney if he chooses to proceed with ending the marriage. And I will cut off all contact with both of you. Permanently. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of the decision hung in the air, pressing down on all of us. Finally, Patricia spoke. Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the commanding woman who had walked into my house that morning, ready to put me in my place. "And if we agree to all of this," she asked quietly, "will you forgive us?" I had known this question was coming. I had thought about it for days, turning it over in my mind, examining it from every angle. Forgiveness. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. Forgiveness takes time, I said finally. It's not something I can promise right now. What I can offer you is a chance. A chance to make things right. A chance to earn forgiveness through your actions, not just your words. I met my mother's eye steadily. Right now, I'm offering you that chance. What you do with it is up to you. The confrontation ended without resolution that day. I told everyone to go home to think about what had been said to come back the next morning with their decisions. I needed time too. Time to process everything I had learned, everything I had finally said out loud after 30 years of silence. The children stayed with me one more night while Emily and Derek went to a hotel, and Patricia drove home alone. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the day's events, the revelations about my mother's childhood, Emily's breakdown the moment when I had finally stood up and demanded to be treated like a person. Part of me still couldn't believe I had done it. Part of me was terrified they would all reject my terms, and I would have to follow through on my threats. Part of me was simply exhausted, wrung out from the emotional intensity of everything that had happened. Wednesday morning arrived grey and cold. I made breakfast for the children, keeping things as normal as possible despite the heaviness in the air. They knew something important was happening. Lily watched me with those two old eyes reading my mood, the way she had learned to read the moods of all the adults in her life. I tried to smile at her to reassure her, but I don't think I was very convincing. They arrived separately. Patricia first looking like she hadn't slept either. Emily and Derek together, though they walked through my door with visible distance between them. Ruth joined via video call again, her face filling my laptop screen. And then the children who I had asked Margaret to bring over for this final part. We gathered in my living room, a strange assembly of damaged people trying to find a way forward. The children sat on the floor near my feet, quiet and watchful. The adults arranged themselves on chairs and couches, nobody quite looking at anyone else. Patricia spoke first. She stood up from the couch, her hands clasped in front of her, her face pale but determined. When she spoke, her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I've thought about everything that was said yesterday," she began. "I've thought about it all night, and I need to say some things to all of you." She turned to face me directly. "Brooke, I was wrong. I have been wrong for 30 years. I told myself I was making you strong, making you independent, protecting you from the kind of pain I experienced as a child. But I wasn't protecting you. I was hurting you. I favoured Emily. I dismissed your achievements. I made you feel invisible in your own family. And last week, I hit you, in your own home, in front of children." Her voice broke. "I am so deeply, profoundly sorry. There is no excuse for what I did. None." She turned to the laptop screen. "Ruth, I owe you an apology too. You gave me $50,000 out of love and trust, and I never paid you back. When you asked for what was rightfully yours, I attacked you and drove you away. I told lies about you for 15 years. I stole your relationship with your nieces. I am sorry. I was wrong." Ruth nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. But I saw her eyes glisten with tears she was too proud to let fall. Patricia turned finally to the children kneeling down so she was at their eye level. "Lily, Ming, Sophie, your grandmother did something very wrong. I hit your Aunt Brooke and you saw it happen. That was scary and it was not okay. Adults should never hit each other, especially not in front of children. I am sorry you had to see that. I am going to work very hard to be a better grandmother." Sophie reached out and patted Patricia's hand, a gesture of innocent forgiveness that made my throat tighten. Lily just nodded seriously. Mason looked at the floor. Emily went next. She stood on shaky legs and pulled a check from her purse, handing it to me, without meeting my eyes. $2,100 made out in her careful handwriting. Payment for the week I had spent caring for her children while she posted vacation photos and ignored my messages. "I agree to all of your terms," Emily said quietly. "Therapy, counselling, the commitment about the children, all of it." Then she turned to face Lily, Mason and Sophie. She knelt down, the way Patricia had, putting herself at their level. "I need to tell you something," she said to them. "Mommy made some bad choices. I left you here without making sure Aunt Brooke was okay with it. I didn't call you enough while I was gone. I've been so caught up in my own problems that I haven't been the mum you deserve." Her voice cracked. "I'm going to try to be better. I'm going to get help. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I promise I'm going to try." Lily reached out and took her mother's hand. That small gesture of connection, of forgiveness, offered freely by a child who had every reason to be angry, broke something open in Emily. She pulled all three children into a hug, crying softly against their hair. Derek stood apart, watching. When Emily released the children and stood up, he spoke for the first time. "I'm postponing my decision about the divorce," he said. 6 months. You have 6 months to show me that you're serious about changing. Therapy, financial responsibility, being present for the kids. If I see real change, we'll talk about rebuilding. If I don't..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Emily nodded, accepting the terms. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was a chance. The same thing I had offered to all of them. After the formal part was over, Ruth and Patricia spoke privately through the video call. I gave them my laptop and stepped away, giving them space for a conversation that was 15 years overdue. I don't know exactly what they said to each other. When they finished, Ruth's eyes were red, but her expression was peaceful. "We're not going to be close, yes," Ruth told me afterward. "Too much has happened, but we've agreed to occasional contact. Birthday cards, holiday calls, we're sisters. That doesn't mean we have to be best friends. It just means we can choose to be civil." As everyone prepared to leave, Lily approached me. She stood in front of me with her serious face and her two old eyes, and she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. "Auntie Brooke, I'm proud of you." Before I could respond, Sophie was hugging my legs, her small arms wrapped tight around my knees. Mason shuffled over and gave me an awkward fist bump, the only way a 7-year-old boy knows how to express emotion. These 3 children who had witnessed so much ugliness in their young lives had just watched adults take responsibility for their mistakes. They had seen consequences happen. They had seen that change was possible. That was worth more than any apology. That evening, after everyone had gone and my house was quiet again, I sat down at my laptop and checked my email. There was a message from Linda, my supervisor. I clicked it open and read, "Congratulations, Brooke. Your promotion to Senior Marketing Manager is now official. Additionally, the Henderson client has specifically requested to meet you in person. We'd like to fly you to New York next month for a series of meetings. Business class, of course. You've earned it." 2 weeks later, I walked into my office building for the first time as Senior Marketing Manager. The title still felt strange on my tongue, like a new piece of clothing that hadn't quite been worn in yet. But as I stepped through the doors and made my way to my new office, a space with actual walls and a door that closed instead of the open cubicle I had occupied for years, I realised that the strangeness wasn't discomfort. It was simply newness. I was growing into someone I had never been allowed to be before. The salary increase had already started making a difference in practical ways. I had paid off the last of my student loans, the debt I had carried since college, because my mother couldn't afford to help me while secretly funding Emily's every whim. I had started a proper savings account. I had even booked a vacation for myself a week in a coastal town where I planned to do nothing but read books and walk on the beach and exist without anyone needing anything from me. But the bigger changes were harder to measure. My colleagues noticed something different about me, though they couldn't quite name what it was. In meetings, I spoke up more. I shared my ideas without prefacing them with apologies. When someone interrupted me, I calmly said, "I wasn't finished," and continued with my point. When a project required more resources than had been allocated, I advocated for my team instead of trying to make do with less. I set boundaries. I said no when no was the appropriate answer. I took up space in a way I never had before. One of my co-workers, a woman about my age who had worked beside me for 3 years, pulled me aside after a particularly assertive meeting. "What happened to you?" she asked, and her tone was admiring rather than critical. "You seem like a different person." I thought about how to answer her. I could have said I had finally stood up to my family. I could have said I had broken a cycle that had been spinning for generations. I could have said I had stopped being invisible. Instead, I just smiled and said, "I finally realised I was worth fighting for." Emily called me every few days now, which was more contact than we had had in years. The calls were awkward at first, stilted conversations between 2 women who didn't really know how to talk to each other without the old patterns of dominance and submission. But slowly they were getting better. Emily was in therapy, real therapy, working through the depression and anxiety she had hidden for so long. She and Derek were in couples counselling twice a week, doing the hard work of trying to rebuild a marriage that had nearly collapsed under the weight of secrets and resentment. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. I knew that. Some marriages couldn't be saved no matter how much work both parties put in. But they were trying, and that was more than Emily had ever done before. Last week, Lily had called me her voice bright with something I hadn't heard from her in a long time. Hope, maybe, or simply the relief of a child whose world was becoming a little more stable. "Mummy hugged me this morning," she said. Like, really hugged me. Not just a quick one because she had to go somewhere. She held on for a long time, and she said she was sorry for being busy all the time. She said she's going to try harder to be present. Lily paused. "I think she means it, Aunt Brooke. I really do." I had to blink back tears as I listened. Progress was possible. Change was possible. Even for people as damaged as Emily, growth could happen if they were willing to do the work. Whether she would sustain it, whether she would become the mother her children deserved, remained to be seen. But she was trying. and Lily was noticing. My mother called me every Sunday evening now. The calls were short, sometimes only 5 or 10 minutes, and often awkward in ways that might never fully resolve. We were learning how to talk to each other without the old dynamics, without her dominance, and my submission, without the favoritism and dismissal that had defined our relationship for 36 years. It was like learning a new language in middle age, difficult and frustrating and slow. But last Sunday, she had said something that stopped me in my tracks. We had been discussing something mundane, probably the weather, or what I had done that weekend, when she suddenly went quiet. "Brooke," she said, and her voice was different than I had ever heard it. Soft, uncertain. "I want you to know something. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, even when I didn't show it, even when I couldn't say it." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The words I had waited 36 years to hear had finally arrived, and I didn't know what to do with them. "Thank you, Mum," I finally managed. "That means a lot." It was small. It was a start. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, and maybe it never would be completely, but it was something I'd never had before, and that mattered. Patricia had started therapy for the first time in her 62 years. She had found a therapist who specialised in generational trauma, and from what she told me, the sessions were difficult. She was excavating wounds that had been buried for decades, confronting the mother who had hurt her and the daughter she had become as a result. It would take time, years maybe, but she was doing the work, and that was more than I had ever expected from her. I saw the children every other weekend now, a formal arrangement that everyone had agreed to. No more dumping them on doorsteps without warning. No more assuming I would drop everything to accommodate someone else's needs. When they came to visit, it was because everyone had coordinated schedules and confirmed plans and treated my time as valuable. I had become the aunt I always wanted to be. Present, loving, reliable. Someone the children could count on to show up when she said she would, to listen, when they needed to talk, to provide a safe space, where they didn't have to be perfect or responsible or anything other than kids. Sophie had made me a card last weekend. She had drawn it herself with crayons and markers, a wobbly rainbow arching over the words "Best Aunt Brooke" in her careful 5-year-old handwriting. I had put it on my refrigerator right at eye level, where I could see it every time I walked into my kitchen. This morning, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over my small backyard. Yesterday, I had planted an apple tree in the corner near the fence. It was just a sapling, now thin and fragile, but the woman at the nursery had promised it would grow strong with proper care. In a few years, it would bear fruit. In a few decades, it would provide shade for whoever lived in this house long after I was gone. I liked the symbolism of it, putting down roots, growing slowly, being patient with the process of becoming. My phone buzzed with a new email. I glanced at the screen and saw it was from Linda, confirming the details of my New York trip. Business class tickets attached, a hotel in Manhattan, meetings with the biggest client our company had ever landed. I smiled, not because everything in my life was perfect. It wasn't. My family was still complicated, still healing, still figuring out how to be different than we had always been. The scars from 36 years of invisibility wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in my life, I was seen. I was valued. I mattered. Not because someone else decided I did, but because I had finally decided it for myself. I took a sip of my coffee and watched the morning light touch the leaves of my new apple tree. The sweetest justice isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building a life that proves them wrong about who you are. And that is where Brooke's story ends, but perhaps yours is just beginning. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been told that your dreams don't matter or that your time has no value, I hope this story reminded you of something important. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to take up space in this world without apologizing for it. Brooke spent 30 years waiting for permission to matter. She finally realized that permission had to come from herself. Maybe today is the day you give yourself that same permission. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't respect your boundaries? How did you find the courage to speak your truth? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Every subscription helps us continue bringing you powerful stories about resilience, justice, and the strength it takes to break cycles that have been spinning for generations. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you matter.